It's getting serious on this track, fam.
Introductions of CBAC.
And if you don't know, now you know.
Chair and a standing committee member.
Jason Mathis. I am a chair. I'm the vice chair. I tried to.
You can have it.
I don't want it. No, no, ma'am. Vice chair and standing committee member.
Good evening. I am Council Chair Deborah Fick-Sanders.
Ruth Whitney, Standing Committee.
Bruce Nissen, Standing Committee.
Gloria Campbell, Ad Hoc Committee.
Karen Mueller, Ad Hoc Committee.
Debbie Reeser, Ad Hoc Committee.
All right. Michael Dema, City Attorney's Office.
Brian Caper, Economic and Workforce Development.
Anthony Chin, Economic Workforce Development Specialist.
Andrea Fowley, Economic Program Manager for the city.
Perfect timing, James. Introductions.
James Corbett, City Development Administrator.
I think we have some more city staff. Any other city staff here that want to introduce? All right, moving along.
Chair, if I may just make a quick announcement. I appreciate everyone's interest in being here this evening. We do have an overflow room if you would like to have a seat. It's being broadcast simultaneously in this community resource room right outside. And then when it's time for public comment, we would encourage you to come on into the room when your name is called. Otherwise, you're welcome to stand, but if you'd like to just have a seat for the meeting, you're encouraged to do so just right outside and to your left. Thank you, Chair.
All right, no problem. So we will move down to approval of the January 16th minutes. Entertaining a motion.
I make a motion to amend the meeting minutes.
All right, thank you so much, Committee Member Mueller. Second?
Second.
All right, so we have a first and a second. Any comments, questions?
Did you say amend?
Amend. It's
But I thought
an-
you
it's a-
said amend.
Oh, you
Yeah,
didn't.
that's-
That's one point.
Okay,
So that's not a motion.
okay,
Yeah, the
so,
motion
all right,
needs
so
to be
point of
made
order, so
first.
the motion goes first.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you
motion
for
goes
that. So at this point, entertaining a motion.
Yes.
Well, would-
So are you?
To amend,
we want to hear the amendment,
Yeah, we
I
need the
think.
amendment.
amendment would be to change the final page where I referenced public correspondence, emails calling for the city to seek affordable housing units for households at 40% AMI and below.
Well, hold on a second. So Attorney D, just for a point of order, my understanding, the motion goes first and then the amendment. No?
No, we want to hear what the,
Said at the meeting.
Yeah, that's,
It has to be what was said at the
That's what I'm
meeting.
thinking. So are you amending you're saying your comment at the meeting was that, or you're
Was
wanting to
inaccurate.
amend it?
The comment at the meeting was that if we want to simplify it, we could just correct the 40% AMI to 80%. That would be a simple correction.
What did we say at the
So
meeting?
that's
Yeah,
the
we just,
motion.
You can't just
What
change.
was said
what
at the
you did.
meeting?
I believe that Committee Member Mueller is saying that she said 80%
Yes.
at the meeting.
I just want to correct it.
She's correcting the record based on what she actually said, so. And with that, Chair, you can entertain a motion to amend the minutes or to approve the minutes as amended.
As amended.
With the
Okay.
proposed amendment, yeah.
All right, so entertaining a motion at this time to approve the minutes as amended with the adjustment or correction to Committee Member Mueller's statement.
Just as amended.
Mhm.
Just as amended.
I move for approval.
All right, so we have a first, a second.
second?
All right, any questions, comments, or concerns outside of that? All right, so moving for,
Please, let's take the vote.
We have to vote on
We have to vote.
right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those not in favor wishing to abstain? All right, it does move forward. Thank you. All right, summary of revisions to the CBAC bylaws. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. So our standing committee, Community Benefits Advisory Council Standing Committee, met Friday night to review the bylaws, particularly related to ex parte communications. They did vote to make a couple changes to the bylaws, which are highlighted in your packet, and I would ask Mr. Dema to walk us through those changes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Caper. So yeah, in short, there was a change to prohibitions on ex parte communications. There are fewer prohibitions. Really, there are just two. They're set forth in there. One remains the subject developer and any individuals or entities or principals associated thereto. Second, you'll see that there's also a prohibition on ex parte communications with any other individual or entity or other principal retained by such individual or entity that will experience a special private gain or loss, particularly an economic benefit associated with the community benefits project. So if there's any questions there, I'd be happy to take them now. Otherwise, I'll move on to the second kind of ancillary change made to the bylaws regarding, it is really just the last sentence there in Article 2, Section 6, relating to communication. And as the standing committee chose to open up some ex parte communications, this is just kind of more of a reminder. It states that members should exercise discretion when engaging with any type of media, including social media. So it's really rather redundant from some of the things that you learned at orientation. But those were the two changes.
Any thoughts or questions? Ms. Ruth?
Well, that means we can all speak with our friends and neighbors who want to talk to us about the CBAC. And he was just pointing out Section 6 on the opposite page of the one we were looking at, where the change was. It's the top of the page, and it's in yellow. It's Section 6, communications. The first sentence says, the CBAC speaks as a body through only through voted consensus motions of its members. So we need to get some votes on the record, because next meeting is our last meeting. And so far we have only approved one. And the other thing we've changed is these bylaws. So we've got some work to do in 2 meetings.
All right. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
So did these have to be, the changes have to be approved by city council, or
No,
they're good?
the standing committee controls the bylaws for the CBAC, and there's no further action required by this body or any other at this point in time.
All righty. Thank you so much, Attorney D. All right, Brian, back to you.
Sure.
Great, thank you, Chair. Next, we would like to go over some information that was provided to the CBAC on Friday related to questions that were raised at last Tuesday's meeting, and some additional background information. The first being the appraisal that was conducted for the site. And you received the full appraisal in your backup materials, but as it is over 100 pages, we didn't reprint it for you, but we did include the synopsis page. So you'll see that right after the bylaws. And essentially just want to highlight a few kind of key points. The appraisal was done as of January 1st, 2023, at the appraisal date. You'll see 4 different numbers that are emphasized at the bottom of the page. The first is the valuation of the vacant land only. So this would include the stadium. After you take out things like Booker Creek, 16th Street, and other rights of way. This does include the 17 acres that was carved out of the RFP for the purposes of the new stadium. The appraised value of that was $330 million. The second number, there was an optional site that was contained in the RFP. And we had asked the development community, you may respond with or without that optional site. If you were to factor in that optional site, it's an additional 2 acres. That now brings the entire development to 78.21 acres. It was appraised at $349,360,000. Then that third number you see is if we were to extract out that 17 acres. So now this is taking the ballpark out. This is just what Hines had responded to. That was $260 million. And then finally, when you put that optional piece back in, as the Rays Hines team did, they did respond, including that optional parcel, you get a value of $279,360,000. A few points just to make on this. One, this is valued at highest and best use. Highest and best use in our downtown would generally be market rate residential. So once you do start to think about other uses that may change the valuation of the site because it's no longer highest and best, that doesn't incorporate things like office space, that wouldn't necessarily account for a new museum, that wouldn't account for entertainment uses, anything else other than that highest and best use, which for the purposes of downtown is generally considered to be that market rate residential. So that's kind of one thing to think about in this $279 million number. The other is related to the city's ability to ultimately work on things like community benefits. So if we were to sell it at highest and best use for the $279 million, it would essentially just be a developer buying it at market rate. Yes, we still own the land and we could impose restrictions on it, but it would no longer be subject to the community benefits policy because the community benefits only say if there is some form of a public investment into a project, then we look at compliance for our community benefit ordinance. If a developer were to pay just fair market value, then ultimately it is their ability to do what they would like on that land, and it would not trigger the CBA process. So if someone was to come in and just pay that $280 million for the land, we would lose some of the other elements that are described as part of the Rays-Hines proposal. Just kind of want to put that out there. I think there's certainly a debate that could be had as to the overall value of the site. But based on the city's appraisal, and this is a firm that we use very often for these types of appraisals. It's a very good firm that we work with regularly. As of January 1st of last year, that was the appraised value of the site. So we just wanted to kind of clarify that. I know there were some numbers that were out there and some kind of contradictory information. So we just wanted to provide, this is what the city has done. This is the information that has been shared with city council, with the administration, and some of the things that go into the consideration of that overall appraised value versus some of the things that are being offered for the site that may lessen that because it isn't necessarily highest and best use anymore. Now we have introduced other elements to it like SBE and MBE, WBE utilization, apprenticeships, other things that wouldn't come with that same restriction if it was just purchased at fair market value. Any questions related to the appraisal?
Brian, I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you. I'm the one that I think asked this question. And it's just because we've heard all these numbers floating around, and I'm not an appraiser. And I just wanted to make sure that the numbers this is a really important number because this is what the whole deal is predicated on. And if this number is inaccurate, that's problematic. And so I asked for a clarifying question. I appreciate you taking the time and sending us the full appraisal and giving us the background with all these different numbers to help us understand and I was incorrect because I sent you an email and I thought it was 277. So thank you. I was incorrect. It's 279 million plus some change is what the actual appraised value is. And I hope we don't have to talk about this anymore because it seems like that is solid, right? Like that's the appraised value of the site.
Correct. Thank you.
Anyone else?
All right, thank you, Chair. Next, we will move on to a request for recent and affordable housing projects. In your background information, you have a map that plots out where those projects are. And on the map, there's numbers. And those numbers, I do apologize for the size of it. Hopefully we can maybe zoom in on your phone. I'll also blow it up here as well. It's very small print, but there were a lot of projects that we wanted to feature. Each one of these on the spreadsheet has a map number assigned to it. So you can sort of cross-reference where it is located geographically in the city. It specifies the total number of units that are constructed. My apologies, let me make this a little bigger. So where it's located on the map, the name of the development, the address of the development, total number of units provided. And then if you carry that across, it is broken up by the AMI levels. And then we break out the various funding that was received for that project. So funding requested if that developer came to us, to the city, and said there was a shortfall in order to make this project occur, would you look at participating? We list what the request was from the city, various sources used by our housing department to help with affordable and workforce housing projects, home money, SHIP money. If they had asked for funds through our South St. Petersburg CRA or other CRA entity, if it received city penny money, ARPA funding, and then finally this other non-city assistance. This is effectively the deal price. So once you sort of, any private equity that would go into it, for example, on project one, Archway Flats on 4th, they had received $610,000. It had since expired, but that was what the city was going to provide into the project. And then they had outside investment of $32 million in order to complete that project, along with the current status and the type of unit, whether that was new construction, renovations, elderly, etc. So we just wanted to provide that snapshot. I know, unfortunately, the committee member that had made that request is in Tallahassee tonight and unable to join us with the Chamber Day in Tallahassee. But we did want to provide that background information just for the committee so you can see where these investments are being made by the city, as well as the different types of projects that are occurring throughout St. Petersburg. And we do have a member of our housing team here, Mark Van Loo, if you have any specific questions on these projects.
So Brian, I have a question. Bayou Court at 4301 6th Street South is not on this spreadsheet. Is that because it was just approved?
Correct. There are a few. This information was provided to City Council at a HLUT committee meeting. They get regular updates on affordable housing. Since then, we have had a few projects that had gone through. Sankofa on the Deuces is another one City Council approved last week, 24 townhome units. It has not made this list just yet, but as we continue to update it, yes, those projects would fall onto this list.
And just out of curiosity, so they were awarded 2.7 million. So are they going through the CBAC process?
Because it is a affordable and workforce housing project, those are exempt from the community benefit ordinance. And the rationale behind that is the receiving of that affordable housing development is the community benefit. So anything that is 100%. Now, if it's mixed use, for instance, the gas plant is a perfect example, 20% affordable workforce housing, it does go through it. If it was 100% affordable workforce housing, it would be exempt from the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
All right.
Moving right along, households by AMI. And we do have a couple slides for this. This information was provided to us by our housing team, so I thank them for their quick work in putting all of this together. The current population of St. Petersburg, 274,662. The current number of households, 123,000. The average persons per household, 2.23. And the estimated median income in 2022 was $72,500 per household. As we look into the area median income, there are 13,286 households, or 10.8% of the households in St. Petersburg, that are at 30% area median income or less. 33,643 households, or 27.4%, that are between 31 and 80% of AMI. And finally, 21,148 households, or 17.2%, that are between 81 and 120% AMI. And when we start to group them together, approximately 38.2% of households in St. Petersburg are at or below 80% AMI. 17.2% are between 81 and 120, and 44.6% of households in the city earn above 121% of the AMI.
Well,
Yes, Dr. Whitney.
I think we should compare this to what is offered by the Rays Hines project. And if you take those two top numbers with the percentages and add them together, you get 38.2%. This is just 80% and below, which I call affordable housing. And that Rays is offering 10% of the housing that they plan to build for that. And for the 81 to 120, that's their workforce. They're offering 10% in their project. And 100%, 120% or more is, you didn't put this on the chart, is 46%. And they're offering, Heinz Rays is planning to do 80% of their building at that rate. By the way, Dick Pierce, who some of us know, provided information, and he had different statistics for the 46.
44.6.
Yeah, 44.6 for the 120 or more. He saw that as 45%. And he saw the under 80%, which is really the affordable, as 55%. But, you know, everybody gets different figures on this. So I just want to comment, I think that if they're providing 44% of only 44% of the housing, and it's 80% of what they're building. I mean, if these are statistics from what's happening already.
Can I add on to what you're talking about? When we started the meeting, we talked about how we need to build 40% of affordable housing into future developments to meet the needs of the existing local residents. I don't think that necessarily a standard for every development, but for this development in particular, its intention is to meet the community needs, especially in regards to affordable housing. So I think that the AMI levels that we're seeing here should be reflected in the numbers of housing units that are within the proposal.
And are any of us willing to make I mean, Jason, you've been speaking about this issue as well. Are we ready to do a motion on this?
I'm not prepared to do a motion on this.
What do we?
Committee members, if I may, we do have Rays Heinz representatives that are here to address some of the other comments that we heard last week as it relates to affordable housing. So they may address some of your questions as well. Good, very good information and dialogue. But just want to let you know before taking any official action that they are here and they are prepared to address the committee this evening as well.
And I would just add, we can make motions after hearing the whole thing. So
Okay.
keep that in mind if you think we need a motion on that front, or all of us should keep that in mind if we think we need a motion on that front.
And they were sent a list of questions prior to this meeting, correct?
Correct. Thank you, Chair. So I think this is the next one. So we also last week had briefly touched on the difference between procurement code requirements and the community benefit ordinance, especially as it related to some definitions. We also wanted to just highlight, and this was identified as part of our committee of the whole with City Council back in October, but any of the work that receives direct public funding, so for the purposes of the vertical development that Heinz is doing, that would be the infrastructure, the $130 million infrastructure contribution from the city. It is required to follow our city procurement codes. You can see the 3 sections, and those sections were provided in your backup in greater detail. But effectively, 15% of all hours worked on the project will be performed by apprentices. 15% of all hours worked will be performed by disadvantaged workers, and contractors and subcontractors shall pay a responsible wage. And just for a kind of point of public information, although the stadium isn't governed by the community benefits ordinance, it is governed by these procurement sections because that too receives public funding. So these must be met as part of both the infrastructure piece as well as the stadium construction.
What's the responsible wage? How do we determine that?
There is a definition in the code, and I would have to defer. We can get you that information. I would ask our procurement team for that, but I believe it is tied to particular industries and updated on an annual basis.
And the data comes from the U.S. Department of Labor. The labor movement relies on it a great deal to decide what's the minimum that needs to be paid on various things.
And Ms. Campbell, if I may, in your backup, it's section 2277A, payment of responsible wage. Yeah, every contractor shall pay and shall ensure that all subcontractors pay no less than the hourly wage for each craft or trade under the most recent Davis-Bacon Act wage rates listed for Pinellas County to each employee for every hour of covered work performed by that employee. So the Davis-Bacon wage rates are ultimately what gets used.
One comment, the middle one, disadvantaged workers, I could not find that in the Heinz Rays impact report at all. Those words, I couldn't find them.
I do have a question. A two-parter. So how is it tracked and how often is it tracked?
So this is tracked by our Office of Supplier Diversity. I believe, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, they provide, is it semi-annual updates to City Council?
I'm not sure. We'd have to follow up on that.
We can get some additional information, but it is, our procurement team does track this information and does provide it to City Council on a regular basis. And Chair Fix-Sanders, I don't know if you recall how often it comes to BFT, but I do know I think it's twice a year.
Brian, just to be clear, to make sure I understand, this is the St. Petersburg Procurement Code. So this is for projects that the city is working on, but it would not apply to our project. I think this might get to something that Ruth mentioned. This is not part of the Heinz Rays deal because that's a public-private partnership, but this is something that the city would participate in for the stadium, for the infrastructure improvements, for the other elements that are not part of the community benefits. Is that
That is
accurate?
correct, Vice Chair. So yes, this.
No, go ahead.
This does apply to any city project. So anything that we are actually constructing must qualify for this. Anything that we are funding must qualify for this because we are paying for a portion of the infrastructure, not the entirety of the infrastructure. The entirety of the infrastructure must follow these three procurement codes. The vertical development, because ultimately we are not providing any direct funding for that, is not subject to these procurement ordinances. However, it is subject to what the community benefit agreement is that ultimately City Council approves. So there is nothing that would prevent the CBAC from looking to incorporate some of this because Heinz Rays will be doing it already for the infrastructure piece, but it is a separate distinction from the community benefit ordinance that has the guidance document and certain elements versus something that we are funding directly that must conform to this.
I think, Ruth, that might be why it wasn't included because they're not, this is a different standard that the city does versus what a private developer would.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to highlight.
So I had the floor after he finished, please. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
So with that being saying, and I want to be clear with what Dr. Whitney is actually asking, the disadvantaged worker piece. Thank you, Brian, for explaining that. It didn't have to be in the impact, but it has to be on our term sheet in regards to our guidance document, correct?
That is correct.
And it is in the guidance document, correct?
You are
Okay,
correct.
I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't required for the impact, but as long as it's in the guidance document, which is the governing body of what we're doing, then we're okay. But I just wanted it to be clarified that it didn't have to be in the impact as long as it's in the guidance document.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah, we can make it.
okay.
I want to add on to the comments about the different construction. There's some constructions completed by the city, and that's the stadium construction infrastructure. And then there's the vertical construction of this project itself, which currently this does not apply to. However, I wanted to make the point in the previous community benefits from the previous developer was included in the vertical construction. 15% apprenticeship, 15% MBE, WBE, and 15% total labor hours. 15% construction jobs filled by South St. Pete CRA residents. So I just wanted to point out it is a possibility because it was included in the previous community benefits for the vertical construction.
I just want to add one other quick thing. When Gypsy Gallardo was on this committee, she kept pointing out that these are what the codes require, that especially regarding the SBE, MBA, et cetera, they never were met, never even came close to being met. And there's been lack of actual compliance with that. And the argument being given always that they're unable to find them and therefore you can get a waiver. And since you can't find minority and small businesses that are enough to be able to do this work, that therefore it's not being done. So I know if she were still on this committee, she would be raising that point very forcefully. So I thought I better bring it out because that's a very important point to her. And I think to some of the rest of us.
And I would say we need to add it to the one we have passed, the top one that we passed last time, that we have to have quarterly written reports to ensure that there's evidence of compliance. And we need to add that one. And if we add one on the disadvantaged workers as well.
And I would, Chair, if I may, just to clarify on how we actually track this information, I want to thank Assistant City Administrator Green for watching us virtually and providing some information. We receive biweekly payrolls for all covered projects to verify. It applies to any project over $1 million that the city is doing, and that report is provided to City Council annually. However, the community benefits agreement, we can put in different reporting requirements. So if the CBAC wants quarterly reports, that is certainly something we can put into the agreement.
Okay, so that was going to be, this is at one of those points where we can make a motion that we're asking for quarterly reports to make sure, what was your phrase, Dr. Whitney? Because I want to make sure that I'm addressing what your request was.
Well, it was for the top one, the apprentices.
Okay, so you wanted quarterly reporting.
Well, we could ask what the city had.
Well, we could, but we can also come up with our own.
Okay.
But I want to make sure that we are getting the reporting that we're asking for and what that need is. So
Written quarterly reports.
there you go.
To be presented to whom?
Well, we
City
council,
council?
we get it. I think what, semi-annually, I think, twice a year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But if
Council's
we
annually.
need to get it quarterly, but we get it quarterly, how is that going to benefit others? How it would benefit is though it would be public access, be public record, and anyone could pull that information. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable ask, is to have that information. And since you brought it up, and Dr. Whitney wants to make sure we vote on something, I think that is something that we need to have documented for the record.
Okay.
So just for clarity, so we're
She's just asking for a quarterly report.
just a quarterly report
That's the-
that
yeah.
the percentages are being met.
Right.
But I think the concern, and thank you, Mr. Neeson, because I've listened to some of the old meetings, and the concern is that it's not being met now.
It's not being
So
met.
what is the I don't want to say necessarily penalty, but what is a standard that can be implemented to, one, ensure that it's being met, and or that measures are being put in place to get to that space? Because the reporting, I hear and thank them for listening in, but submitting time cards, just submitting time cards, but the data is not available, and it's not reflective because previous meetings have stated that it's been asked for and it hasn't been presented because it wasn't there. And so how can we ensure in this motion that it's very clearly stated?
So in order for us to actually justify penalties and not meeting certain standards, we have to have data to go by.
Right.
Right now, we currently do not.
Right.
So by having that quarterly report to go back and justify implementing penalties for it not being met, we have to have something to review. We have to have something that's out there, because we don't get the time sheet record. We don't get that. That's not information that we get. So by implementing a report at least quarterly, we can now have data that we review. You have to have data and statistics to judge moving forward. If you don't have it, what do you have it to base it on? So even based on what Mr. Neeson's comment was, that it may have been an issue for this meeting, but we still have no documentation of not meeting those needs.
So are we saying apprentices, disadvantaged workers, MBEs, and WBEs?
Well, we've only voted on the
Yeah, we have-
apprentices.
Apprentices piece.
We haven't voted on
So
that.
far,
Haven't
but
done- yeah.
we should be sure to add it to all of those.
Okay. We're ready to move with a motion?
I tried to make it, but I was.
Yeah, she
confused.
made a motion.
I didn't hear it.
And-
You gotta-
So the motion was that we would request a quarterly report to monitor compliance of the 15%, we've already done it for apprentices, of the disadvantaged workers, the contractor and subcontractors of the responsible wage. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, no,
Ms.
we haven't done, we only have a motion.
Well, you
so
just
we
said
wanna
all
add-
three. So we did the first one
We
and you're
want to,
trying to
we
get
want
to
to
the
add this,
second.
no, but we
I-
want to add this on the first.
If I may.
Okay, please,
yeah.
Attorney Dina.
So the last week, the 15% rule for apprentices was moved and approved by this body. I believe that now you're putting in a monitoring requirement for the apprentices
Okay.
at a rate of a quarterly report.
Written
That would,
quarterly.
a written quarterly report. And that would be thus a public record and available to the public for review and inspection.
So we're only doing apprentices, not disadvantaged workers, so I'm clear. Okay.
I just have a quick question. Would there be any prompt reason not to modify it if it's the will of the body to all three of these rather than simply the apprentices?
That's what I thought.
If we think it ought to apply to all three, let's just do it with one fell swoop rather than saying let's pass it for the first one and then let's pass the second
Well, we-
resolution for the second. and on
We
and
haven't passed the second one, though. That was my problem with it. You can't amend.
I'm just
something.
saying-
Do it all in one.
I'm just saying if you
When we
want.
get to them, we want all of them.
Well, why can't we just do it in one motion? I guess
Can't
that's
be
the,
one motion. is what
that's
I'm
the
saying.
point I was trying to, that's what I
Yeah,
thought. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's really good.
Oh,
I just
okay.
didn't think that when you're amending something, you can only amend the one we've already passed.
We're not.
Yeah, so we haven't passed the second one,
We haven't passed
For
the second one and done
disadvantage?
anything with the third one.
which is up for
Yeah,
discussion.
so
I think we should talk about the other
I
two.
think so too.
Okay. Well, we'll hold the motion, Chair.
they just had a lawyer meeting, so.
They did. That's
No, I just want to, we think that it would be necessary to address the second and third points independently to ensure that that's
Okay.
even a part of what's on the table. And then can talk about monitoring of those
Okay,
requirements.
So I
So
withdraw that motion.
No, you don't withdraw the whole thing. You just apply it just to the apprentices.
Well, no, we're going to discuss.
We need to
Other
discuss
than
them
all of
first. Yeah, we need to talk about them first. So I will.
Yeah, well, we have talked. We passed the first one last meeting. We passed the apprentice one at their last meeting.
But not with quarterly reports.
Yeah,
Just
and that's
the
what
same.
that's what you're adding to it. This is the quarterly reports to the apprentices.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding. I thought that we were talking about applying to the last two, what has already been done for the first one. And then after we've got all three of them saying we need monitoring and the rest, then you can say the quarterly with the second
Oh,
motion.
so you want to pass it?
That's just what I thought. I thought we were trying
just to
get the
clarify again,
same
though,
status the
that,
first one.
that this is the procurement code, not necessarily what's in a CBA at this point in time. So
So this is, so, all right, so this is just the code, so there really is no motion for the code.
Right, not for the code.
Right, so am I understanding that properly, Attorney D?
correct.
These
The only
are
motion
discussions.
that's been done with respect to these code requirements is to take the 15% of hours worked by apprentices and put it into the CBA.
Right.
That's the only thing that's happened so far.
And I was just suggesting that our next action be to put the second and the third into the CBA. And then after we have all three of them in the CBA, we can have a second motion saying we want quarterly reports.
So point of order.
That's just the order. I just try to
Yeah.
facilitate here, getting it.
Point of motion, a point of order. I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
So.
No motion on the
there's
table.
No motion on the table.
Thank you.
So can I ask a question?
Yes.
Michael, is it
Yes, ma'am.
overreach for us to be amending the procurement code by requesting the reports quarterly?
You're not.
Before we go
You're
on
not
to-
amending the procurement code. This has been, kind of a point of reference, that, to compare vis-a-vis what's being offered with the community benefits package right now. And so there's a little bit more leeway as to kind of what you pick and choose. But you're not amending the procurement code here.
Okay, I just wanted some clarification.
Right, so Bruce-
And we've long said, just for, that monitoring was always going to be a part of whatever agreement ends up happening there. So helping to quantify that and parameterize it is within the purview of this body as well.
And I think that's
So Bruce, was your motion?
So I would like to move, I have not made a motion, but I'd like to move. I'd like to move that 15% of all hours worked will be performed by disadvantaged workers be incorporated into the CBA program, and that every contractor and subcontractor will pay a responsible wage be incorporated into the CBA program.
Thank you. So we have a motion. We have a second.
Second,
All right. So I think I heard Ms. Ruth first. Any discussion on this?
I'm going to ask that they be separate items because I will tell you, I do not support the second one, but I do support the third one. So
Okay.
if you combine them, that makes it difficult to vote.
Okay. Thank you for that. Jason.
I just will reiterate a point that I made last week when I voted to support the apprentice program. And that is that the city's team and the Rays Hines team has spent about 8 months negotiating all of this. And it is totally appropriate for us to say, we think it needs this also. We think it should be included. We think additional elements should be part of this negotiation. My sense is that there will be, that will ensue another negotiation, and they will say, that's fine, we can add that. We think that will cost X amount of dollars. What would you like us to take away? And because there's a net that they're willing to put into the, and that's okay. Like we can say, hey, the stuff that you thought was important, we're representing the community benefits. We don't think that's as important. We think something else is more important than what you've already negotiated. What would you like to take away? So I think these are all valuable, important elements. I think there's a reason they're in the St. Petersburg Procurement Code. I just want to be clear that we can, our job is just to look at the deal and make recommendations, and that ultimately we're not in charge. We're just making recommendations. I'm happy to recommend these things with the caveat that that may mean that some other things that we also think are important are not included in the final analysis. I will support these, but I will recognize that there may be some other stuff in the negotiation that gets sucked out that we also think is important because we prioritize these elements that are not part of the negotiation that took place over the last 8 months. That's my comment.
So that's my problem with it, is we don't know what the effect will be on the other portions that might be of more benefit to it. So that's, and we're already doing the 15% for the apprenticeships. We already have the SBE and MBE requirement. And to put this on top, we're putting it on top without knowing what will happen, what the effect will be.
All right. So we have a motion. We have a second. Bruce, with the feedback, do you want to move forward with your motion?
I want to move forward with my motion. I also just want to say that these arguments that are being made would argue against any improvement, because any improvement, they might want to take something else away somewhere else. And so I just don't think it's a very convincing argument or a worthwhile argument to even consider. We want to improve this, and these are the improvements we think are needed. And to say, well, if you improve it, maybe it's going to get hurt somewhere else. That's a vacuous, that's a statement that could be said anytime you make any kind of improvements. And I don't buy that as a very effective counter argument against passing these things.
All right, and so hold on one second. I just
Yeah,
want to
let's
clear. And
have a
so to honor Debbie's first comment, the request to separate the two and move them forward is two individual motions. Do you want to?
I have no problem with that. We could do first the disadvantaged workers and then have a second motion saying the same thing for responsible wage.
All right.
Mr. Nissen,
oh, and
wait,
the part about the written reports.
yeah, we have to do all these one at a time, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you would just amend your motion to address bullet point 2
Yeah.
without the monitoring. Okay,
Yeah,
so
we haven't
so
got the
moved.
monitoring. Your monitoring will be a later motion
That's the
for
second,
all
yeah,
three.
that's the later motion.
Okay.
So
your
moved.
first motion
That's-
is with the amendment to move forward with 15% of all hours worked for disadvantaged workers.
Correct.
All right.
Is the seconder?
You have a second?
Yes.
All right, so we have a
Okay.
second. Any comments in regards to that? All right, we'll move forward with the vote. All those in favor of accepting the motion as stated?
I'd like to do a roll call.
All right.
Thanks.
Committee member Whitney,
Yes.
member Neeson,
Yes.
committee member Campbell,
Yes.
committee member Mueller,
Yes.
Committee Member Reeser,
No.
Councilmember Fix Sanders,
Yes.
Chair Matthews,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mathis.
No.
Let's move forward.
Correct.
Your second motion?
Yeah, second motion is that every contractor and subcontractor shall pay a responsible wage be incorporated into the CBA program.
All right, thank you. Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, any comments or questions? All right, we'll move forward with the vote. You want a roll call as well for this one or no?
Yes, for all substantive motions today. Yes, please.
All righty.
Committee Member Whitney,
Yes.
Committee Member Neeson,
Yes.
Committee Member Campbell,
Yes.
Committee Member Mueller,
Yes.
Committee Member Reeser,
Yes.
Councilmember Fix Sanders,
Yes.
Chair Matthews,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mathis.
Yes.
Now this, we're gonna add the,
Now,
you want to add it?
you go ahead.
Ms. Ruth, you got it.
No,
Do you want me to make the motion?
well, you can add it on. You were gonna add it.
I will also move that there be quarterly reports on compliance with these three and portions of the community benefits program.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so I have a second by Ms. Gloria. Comments? Questions, none? All right, so we'll move forward with a roll call vote.
Committee Member Whitney,
Yes.
Committee Member Neeson,
Yes.
Committee Member Campbell,
Yes.
Committee Member Mueller,
Yes.
Committee Member Reeser,
Yes.
Councilmember Fix Sanders,
Yes.
Chair Matthews,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mathis.
Yes.
All right, it does move forward. Brian, the rest of your presentation.
Great, thank you, Chair. So at this point, we would like to invite, I believe we are joined by Andrew Frazier, Best Source Consulting. Good evening, Mr. Frazier.
Good evening, Brian. Good evening.
Good evening.
So kind of next, we would like to talk about some gas plant proposal housing items that were brought up by the committee last week, specifically as it relates to the timeline of the delivery of the affordable and workforce housing units, the AMI levels that were selected, as well as unit counts and unit types that will be reflected in that affordable and workforce housing. And finally, the discussion as it relates to the penalty in the term sheet for noncompliance versus the streamlined process for the community benefit agreement ordinance that would allow for a buyout of providing those units.
Thank you, Brian. I also have joining us today, Michael Harrison with Hines, and Mr. Harrison will be addressing a majority of the items that are underneath our packet. And we also have Ms. Gwendolyn Reese, who will also be addressing some comments as it relates to restorative actions and the descendants of the gas plant. Michael.
You want to lead with a question? I don't know, Brian, how do you want to?
Absolutely. So I believe Vice Chair Mathis, most of these were.
So I asked the question, and I asked it in the first meeting, but I can rephrase it. I understand the urgency of the stadium construction to try to get that built by opening day. I think 2020. So within a few years, $1.2 billion stadium. And I know the stadium is not part of this conversation, but we face a real affordable housing crisis in this community. And my question was, is there a way that we could prioritize the development of affordable housing to be at a similar rate as the stadium construction? Is there some way that we can hurry the affordable housing units up? I think, as I remember correctly, there are 4 sort of tranches of affordable housing units being delivered. And I wondered if it would be possible to move those up. So there was a timeline question about the delivery of the affordable housing, which is candidly the big chunk of, I think, what the community benefit is as part of this conversation.
Thank you, and it's a privilege to be here with you tonight. So thank you for the opportunity. And you know, you've asked the most complicated question out of the gate, which is how do you make affordable housing work, and how do you make more of it work, and how do you make it work sooner? Excuse me. And there's not a single answer to your question. However, excuse me, the the way that we've and I want to give credit to Brian, really, James, the whole city team. This has been a long process. We started almost 18 months ago when the city issued an RFP, and I think, as everybody knows here, we competed and we're one of 4 firms to submit. And the way that we've structured our master plan, the way that we've worked very closely with the city in terms of how do we build as much affordable housing as we can, as quickly as we can, really comes down to how do you capitalize, how do you finance these affordable housing projects? And there's several different ways to do it, with federal tax grants, state tax grants, city participation. You know, we have a grant writer that's working with us to write grant proposals. So, you know, from our standpoint, we sat down with the mayor and the city and we said, what's important to you? You know, we responded to an RFP that had 23 guiding principles in it, and the mayor made it very clear that affordable housing was one of the most important principles. And in doing so, you know, we went through, and I think we had proposed something on the order of 850 units in our original proposal. The mayor, and it was a question that was, I think, also brought up, was, can we do less affordable housing, but do more at lower AMIs? The fact of the matter was, we sat down very closely and listened to the mayor. We listened to staff and had them help set our priorities. And so a couple of those priorities were that they wanted to see more affordable housing because it can impact more people and more lives. The second thing was that the mayor really wanted to see a senior housing component early on in the process. And so we've committed that the first affordable housing project component of the project will be a senior living project. And that's going to come out in this first phase. The reality is, and I think anybody, you know, that lives in St. Petersburg and has watched the city work as hard as it does to get affordable housing capitalized and out of the gates, it just doesn't happen 1,200 units at a time. And the other part of this was that the city made it clear is that you're doing, you know, Hines, you're going to be developing a 20-year project. We want affordable housing to be a priority day one, and we want it to be a priority in the last phase of the project as well. And so that really led to the phasing that we have. And we actually have, you know, as part of the negotiations with the city, you know, we have to deliver a certain number of affordable housing units before we can go ahead with future phases of market rate housing. So they're holding our feet to the fire and saying, you just can't take the low-hanging fruit and go do all market housing. You have to stage the market housing with affordable housing. And so, again, somebody mentioned it, I think you did before you closed that last session. You know, there's about 1,000 variables in this deal between the city and the Rays and Hines. And there's a push and pull that occurs. Every time you move one lever, it affects another. And we really think we've worked very hard with a lot of people on the city staff who have devoted thousands of hours to trying to figure out what is the balance. And what we've ended up with, you know, with you know, spreading the affordable housing commitment over the 4 different AMI levels, spreading out the timing of it so that we don't want to just deliver on our minimum commitments. We want to exceed them. It's just not a reasonable, it's not a reasonable, just to be candid, it's not a reasonable expectation to think you could deliver 1,200 affordable housing units in the next 4 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, cities like, you know, the big, much larger cities with more, you know, more capital invested in it can't do that. And so I think what we've come up with is a balance that really is trying to be fully responsive to the mayor and the RFP that was put forth, and at the same time going beyond just delivering on affordable housing. Our affordable housing commitment during the process of negotiations has gone up 40%. $15 million of our intentional equity commitment is to other affordable housing needs as directed by the city for both rental and ownership. And so we've really tried to push the buttons that the city have said are the highest priorities.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what I'm hearing is a phased approach based on the 20-year timeline, and that the expectation that you could do 1,200 units in the next 3 years is not a reasonable expectation. That's just
That's
not.
a very good paraphrasing of what I said. You did it more eloquently in
I said
a quarter of the
more
time.
eloquently. I did it
Yeah.
faster. I did it more simply.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. I want to think about.
Their founder said there is no such thing as an affordable brick. It costs the same to put a brick in a market rate housing project and an affordable housing project. And so right now we actually feel like it's going to take a lot of hard work to deliver on the phasing that we have.
So Dan, I'm just trying to get a straight answer. So the basic answer is no changes in the timeline, correct?
We're here to listen to what the committee, the questions you have. We're certainly open to having further conversation with staff when we take it in its totality. But we've worked really hard for a year now, working on both the timeline and the commitments.
I just want to reiterate what our purpose is here, which I'm sure you're very well aware. In our purpose is to analyze the benefits and
Absolutely.
see if they're adequate and if they are proportional to the investment of the public. So we're looking at
an illustration at our committee of the whole for city council looking at the appraised value. And it was simply that. It was an illustration. That kind of deduction of value, if you will, was never used at any point in negotiations. We really were starting from the number in the proposal to the city, which at that point in time, I believe was around 98 million. And through negotiations, we were able to increase that to 105. What we were attempting to demonstrate with that illustration was very similar to the explanation that we had earlier this evening, which is that appraisal was done at highest and best use. What is being proposed isn't necessarily highest and best use from an appraised value. When someone is looking at what should that land value be, they are looking at it from market rate residential. We realize there's a lot of other elements that are included in that proposal that aren't market rate residential. We did not, as a city or Hines, anyone during the negotiation process say, let's look at 270 and kind of work back from there. We looked at the 4 proposals that were received. Mayor did strengths and weaknesses on those 4 proposals. Rays Hines did have the highest land value at that point in time. We were very pleased that through negotiations, we were able to increase that by another $7 million for that land. But looking at kind of the discounts, if you will, those were illustrative in nature. It wasn't necessarily part of either the city's logic or Hines Ray's logic as it relates to the true value of the land.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, the word discount isn't appropriate. What the city staff did for the committee of the whole, the appraisal takes into account all of the land. It doesn't take into account the fact that some of that land is going to be used for roads. Some of that land is going to be used for green space. Some of that land is going to be used for a museum. And so that's, as Brian said, highest and best use in city of St. Petersburg is either condo or market rate apartments. It's not office. We've got one of the things, again, I want to go back to is I do agree. This is about what is the public benefit package that's coming out of this? And the mayor was very clear in the RFP. What we're trying to do is build a mixed use village community that replicates how the gas plant district thrived before it was decimated and the trop was built. And that was a place where people worked in both factories and office buildings. It had, retail and markets and stores, and it had housing. And so it functioned as a community. And that's what the RFP wants us to do. And that's really, we think, the best thing for St. Petersburg. And as part of that, if I could just finish answering your question, we did propose, a land price that wasn't just higher, it was double the next highest, proposal that was submitted by any of the other three. And it included an intentional equity package that was nearly double what anyone else proposed. And so it covers a lot of things that are going to be, part of a community that you wouldn't have if someone just took an appraised value and sold land parcels. I'm sorry to.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but the whole point of this project is to provide affordable housing, and we don't have hardly any units compared to the amount of the public subsidy. It's substantial. It's not just amount of subsidy for the stadium, which is substantial, which is nearly $700 million of bond debt. It's not just the subsidy, it's also the value of the land. And you can say that it was based on the appraisal, that's what everyone was working off. Everyone's working off the same appraisal. I understand what you're saying, but the appraisal value is 279, and what we're receiving in purchase price is 105. So somewhere in between there is what you believe is the contributed value. And I know part of that is, I think 15 million was estimated for affordable housing. And the 50 million for community benefits is in there too, but it's kind of counted twice. It comes off of
No, it's
value.
not. Yeah, they're two separate issues. One is our commitment to affordable housing, and we're providing 1,200 units of affordable housing, half of which will be on-site, half of which will be off-site. Separate and distinct from that, we're committing $50 million worth of an intentional equity program, of which $15 million is also committed to be used for affordable housing at the city's discretion using the city's, housing fund. So it's not double counting. It's two separate commitments that we're making to the city and to the affordable housing programs in St. Pete.
I think a lot of us would disagree on what is considered affordable housing. Like our definition of affordable housing is different than what you're considering.
I just want to say something, right? So sometimes when we use the word "our," we're doing an inclusive. And so if we can make sure that we're speaking as a body, but when we make certain comments, let's make sure that we're speaking as an individual in that body. I do have a question, however. Reasonable and achievable are subjective words, right? It's flex words. And so when I think you may have said it 2 or 3 times. Is it reasonable to say that there is an opportunity to move the timeline for more units up? And then the second part of that is that achievable?
Yeah, I think the answer is the timeline can be moved up if we're able to obtain all of the financing that's necessary to build. And a significant component of that financing is going to come in the form of tax credits or grants from either federal, state, city, or other, funds, grants that are available. And so if we can get access to those funds, then we can build more faster. But it's really a function of something that we're going to continue to apply. I mean, when you do affordable housing and you're applying for federal tax credits, the LIHTC credits as they're called, it's a lottery system, and you don't get them every year. And if we got them every year, we could commit to more. If we knew we had certainty around that, we could commit more definitively to a timeline. But we're going to use, for us, the sooner we can build it and deliver it, the better it is for the overall project. It's not just a matter of developing market rate housing or office. The sooner we can build more, the more this mixed use community can live and thrive, and it'll be more valuable to us. Time is one of our most expensive, resources. And so if we can deliver something faster, quicker, better, we have every motivation in the world to do.
Thank you for that.
I just want to point out that we're mixing up affordable housing with workforce housing and all the rest. You're not providing 1,200 affordable housing If affordable housing means housing that's available to somebody making 80% or less of median income, you're not even close to that, not even a third of that, perhaps a third of that at most, spread out over many, many, many years. So I think we need to have some linguistic clarity here, both in terms of the timeline, in terms of what we're talking about, because many of these things that are so-called workforce housing at 120% of AMI, many of them are very close to market rate or even at market rate. In other words, it's meaningless. It's not any kind of benefit whatsoever that's being given. So I think we should have some precision here. When we talk about affordable housing, we should be talking about housing available to people making 80% or less of median income.
Okay. I mean,
And that changes the numbers enormously.
well, again, we've committed to a quantity in each one of the AMI thresholds. I'm not trying to change that. I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm sorry for the misuse of the word.
Well, we need more in the affordable. And when you looked at that chart that he had on the screen, and according to this chart, the people who live over 120 are 46% of the population, and the people who live less than 80% of the AMI are 38%. Yet and I'm using just the 80 AMI is only 10% of what we're getting in the affordable housing out of 10% of the 6,000 units total. And the people who are going to pay 100% of the AMI are getting 80% of, and if you add in, the other, it's the workforce, you got 90%. So 90% is, and it's only 10% of, is there any way to move some of the workforce that you're calling workforce into the AMI to make the AMI number and percentage higher? Or as Jason mentioned in some of his things that he's written to us, changing the numbers some so that there's more AMI and you can afford to do it.
What again, the process that we've gone through with staff and the mayor is to really try and maximize the benefits across all housing strata. And that includes affordable and it includes workforce. And somebody made the comment earlier that if you were to change those percentages, it's going to affect the overall math for everything. And so it doesn't come without changes elsewhere. And this is really where we listened to staff and we listened to the mayor about what their priorities were and where we should put the emphasis. And that's how we got to the mix of 60, 80, 100, and 120% AMI that we did within the 1,200 units. And again, just I may sound like a broken record here, but our original proposal, which was reviewed by the city's economic advisor, was measured to be 70% higher than any other proposal. So this wasn't done in a one-on-one negotiation. We competed with other developers. Anyone could compete, anyone could submit proposals. Our proposal was measured by the city's independent economic advisor to be 70% higher than anybody else's proposal. And so within that, our proposal included 850 units of affordable and workforce housing. The mayor asked us to work hard to push that up. We pushed it up from 850 to 1,200. And so we've already come a long way down that road. And again, we're here to listen, but there's a pretty significant increase in what was proposed in a very open and public process, and where we've increased that to through the city's and staff's efforts.
May I ask a question? So we're just an advisory board, like we're just here to say, hey, mayor, this is a recommendation, or city council, we think you should support this if X, Y, or Z. So we could say, instead of 500 units at 120, maybe 100 units at 120. I don't think you can really use LIHTC for 120% of AMI anyway. So focus more LIHTC funds on the lower threshold And that's our recommendation. That's all it is a recommendation. You could say back to the city, yeah, that works for us, or let us work at the numbers and see if we could do that. Let's see what happens. I mean, I want to be very conscious of the fact that we're all, volunteers without a staff, or, we can't do financial analysis. We don't have legal representation. Trying to think about what does the community need and how can we voice that in an appropriate way. And I think to Carrie's point, how do we make sure that the discount of the land, or whatever the public investment is in this portion of the project, is fair and equitable, and that people are getting something back? Like, that's it. That's our only job, and to say, yep, we think it's fair. It's a fair deal. So we could make a recommendation to say we would love to see an increase in affordable units at 80% or 60%. There is, I will disagree with Bruce. There is still a value of having units in this project at 100% of AMI and 120% of AMI. That has some value for workers in that community who can work there and who might otherwise be priced out. And that is a threshold, a lower threshold than what market rate dictates. So there is some value to that. But we could say we would recommend as an organization, as a CBAC, that the ratio should be slightly altered if it doesn't affect your bottom line, if it doesn't affect your cost of actually producing the project. And that seems to me to be a reasonable assumption that we could make. The mayor could ignore it. City council could say, no, too late, didn't work out, not what we want to do. But we could make that recommendation as a body, say, this is what we think we've heard from the community. This seems to be what people are saying. I guess I'm just saying that. You don't have to answer.
I'm not sure it was a question, but
I guess my opinion is that, number one, the situation we're in with affordable housing is not going to be solved by this project. I think we get the best we can and we move on and we make better decisions, because the reason we're in this situation has nothing to do with this deal on affordable housing. The second thing is, I always look at it as, maybe the issue is not that so much that people can't afford it, but how can we help people get better wages? How can we help move their skills up to where they are 100 and 120% AMI? And I think that's where the emphasis should be, not trying to keep people stuck at 40% of AMI. So, I think that somehow we may be missing some things here. I think we want to get the best deal, but I think that when we are so focused on just trying to squeeze every last 40 and under AMI out of this deal, we're missing the point. I mean, it's much bigger than that. I think have much bigger opportunities.
Thank you, Ms. Gloria. Chair.
Thank you for saying that, because my comment, first of all, I want to say the very first meeting, the first question I asked was, is there an opportunity for change? And I was told yes. And I'm going to honor that. The second thing I would like, and I said the first meeting, that all of us are here for a reason. And yes, Jason, we are here as advisory. But when I hear statements like we listen to the mayor and we listen to the staff, we forgot that part about, and we listen to the residents.
Yes.
We forgot that part. And that's the part that is critical. And I don't want us to forget that. The third part, a third comment I heard is that the main reason why we're here is for affordable housing. That is not the main reason why we're here.
Exactly.
It is not solely for affordable housing, and let us not please forget that there are additional things that come with it. And I totally agree. The last meeting, the comment was made, we got to the 1,200 number. You did the math. That's what it equated to. I know I asked, and I'm going to ask again, what does it look like with that same bottom line with, and it may be a smaller number of units, but if it's more accessible, we use affordable like that's really easy to come by. Mine is more accessibility. It's one thing to provide them, it's another thing who's going to get access to them. So that's my issue. So I'm asking, as I've asked and asked, what does accessible housing look like with that? So the 120, we know we need the balance. I heard 100% AMI last time. What does it look like to move 5 units, 10 units with the same dollar amount? And I don't know what the calculations are. So I'm not sitting here saying, oh, it's just that simple. But at least let me see it so that I can understand what it looks like versus being told, well, we already worked the numbers. Okay. What does that mean? I never received the opportunity to look at what those calculations are. And I think that that is a reasonable request when you have that question out there in regards to housing, because we still have not gotten past housing to get to the other elements of this CBAC and why we are here. And I want to make for a statement for the record. Mr. Neeson and quite a few of us were a part of the original CBA discussion. What was passed in 2000 and what, 2021
Yeah, 21.
wasn't even half of what we asked for, but we went with it because we knew having a base and a foundation for future negotiation was better than having nothing at all. So I want to remind this advisory council, we need to, and Ms. Ruth, Dr. Ruth made it very, very clear, we don't have a whole lot of meetings to get a whole lot done. I don't know what the opportunity is going to be for extending a meeting, if it because I was going to make one, of extending the asking for one more meeting, but I just want us to be mindful. I am so encouraged, and I'm grateful for the time that staff and Hines actually took to get this deal done. But okay, so yeah, I'm from the hood. I believe in you give up a show thing for some more thing and end up with no thing.
Yeah.
And I want us to be mindful of where we are and how we've gotten to this point. So the AMI issue, I still want to see what that looks like. I want us to have some consideration and conversation of the other aspects of what it is that we have based on the time. I'm going to let our committee chair make that motion for the extension, but I just want us to still not use that term advisory so lightly, because I'm hoping that you're hearing the residents, and I'm hoping that we're actually making the best effort to meet some of these this low hanging fruit, because we weren't a part of the monthly day-to-day. Had we been a part earlier on, I think we would have had less questions and less concerns. But I also don't want us committee to get tied up in trying to start something that's I'm not supporting starting over. I'm not supporting, because I think we're in a good place. I think we're in a very good place. And so as far as future changes and considerations, I'm going to hold you to the commitment when I asked my very first meeting, is there room for change? I'm not saying rewrite the whole process. I'm not saying start over. Let us, because if there isn't, why have we been a part of this process at all? That's just a simple question. If nothing that we were going to say was going to make an impact, why were we here? Why did we go through the process of being chosen? So I'm going to leave those comments there. I have no other questions. Thank you.
So much. We have anyone else?
I just wanted to add, on a previous CBA project, we rejected a project because it didn't have enough affordable housing percentage-wise. And I know it's a different project, and I'm not going to belabor the point, but they asked for 30%, and that was a mayor's decision to decline the Moffett mixed-use project over that. And the previous proposal with the previous administration had 10,000 units and 2,000 of affordable. And that's all I wanted to say.
Well, on another issue, the problem of if you're going to opt out of creating these units, the figure that was figured out that you think works is 25,000 per unit, whereas our CBAC, in order to streamline it, they have to pay 150,000 per unit. And so how did it get so from 150,000 to 25,000? And shouldn't that be higher?
It might be a part of the question that Brian can take, but as I understand it, the streamline process, that's a process for projects that are typically higher density than what we have overall for the project. But even so, that's just a straight payment from a developer to the city, and they're going on and building a building on a site. Here, we're doing more than building a building on a site. We're committing $50 million intentional equity. We're funding $50 million of infrastructure for the project. So it's not really the same comparison. That $150,000 opt-out from a developer would have to be adjusted for all the other commitments that we're making and the money that we're spending on other aspects of the project. So that was one of your questions. The second was the size of the penalty. We're a pretty large development company, but when I look at and have to explain to our ownership that we're signing up for a $30 million liability, that means something to Hines. And if you look at the $25,000 per unit, that's a $30 million liability that Hines is signing up for. That's a lot of money to me and to our firm. And so it's pretty significant to us. The second part of the negotiation and the discussion is that to the extent we don't build, the city owns the land, and the city will do something else with the land, whether it's affordable housing or some other use for it, in the middle of our project. And that would be potentially detrimental to the value of everything that we're doing on a market rate basis around that site. So, it's again, part of a negotiation, but it's a large amount of money. B, we need to be able to control our own destiny. So we have to deliver on that obligation so that we don't have things sprouting up in the middle of our project that could negatively impact the rest of our project. And then the last thing is, I'd say, the Rays have been corporate citizens in this town for 3 decades, and they put their money where their mouth is. They've done great things for this community, and they're signing up for another 3+ decades to do more of that. And Hines is we're a privately held firm. We're 70 years young, and we, our reputation is the most important thing to us. What I do here impacts my coworkers in Chicago, in China, in London, in Dallas, and so we can't afford to not deliver on our promises. And so that's part and parcel to why that was negotiated.
If I can provide just a little bit more context to Mr. Harrison, the $25,000 penalty and the $150,000 opt-out are very different, and those were established to be different. The $150,000 opt-out is a developer saying, I'm not going to do this on my project at all. And instead of that, I'm going to pay the city to go build that somewhere else. And that was why that was part of the streamline process. It was with the mindset that the developer would say, yes, we would love to provide affordable and workforce housing in my deal, but it doesn't make sense. So instead, I'm just going to pay the city to go put that somewhere else and not really do it in my project. The penalty is intended, and granted, everything changes over time and everything usually gets more expensive. But when we were looking at changing when we were looking at having our first conversation almost a year ago at this point, $25,000 was the city's average subsidy in a affordable or workforce housing deal. And you'll see some of those numbers in the spreadsheet that was provided in your backup. And so the thought process in that penalty was, if Hines Rays doesn't do that, how much is it going to cost the city to work with a different developer, to work with a Blue Sky, or work with a Habitat, or work with someone else to come in and put those units elsewhere throughout the city? And at that time, we were generally providing about $25,000 as an average subsidy in those projects. And so that was the mindset used, understanding, yes, they're still going to, and that was also part of the timing, those 4 categories. Because if for some reason Hines Rays is not able to do that in the second tranche, doesn't let them off the hook for that third. They still have to build those 300 units at that next period in time, or those penalties apply. So it is a little bit different of a consideration than the streamline process, where that $150,000 was meant just to completely get you out of it entirely and still receive credit for it and move on. In this instance, it was looked at as, if that's not going to be built, the city's going to have to work with someone else to do that. What is it going to cost us to subsidize that? And at the time we had those negotiations, $25,000 was approximately the average. And as Mr. Harrison mentioned, and we've brought up in other conversations as well, for the on-site housing, the city does retain the land. So that really is, I think, the most powerful incentive that the city has in this process, more significantly more so than the per unit penalty, which is the city has the land to do whatever we want to do with, and whether that's another RFP or working with a different developer to do that affordable or workforce housing project on the site. That control comes back to the city. Whereas in the streamline process, we would never have that out. That wouldn't be part of the consideration because they've just kind of paid out of it, they've checked the box and moved on. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of clarity on the distinction between subsidizing units, which is what a penalty is intending to do, and just replacing a developer from doing that entirely, which is what that $150,000 was meant to do in the streamline process of the new ordinance.
Okay, Ms. Debbie?
Okay. So I want to actually piggyback off what Ms. Campbell said and Councilmember Big Sanders. So the affordable housing portion is very important, but it's not the only thing that provides the community benefits. Because unlike the Moffett, which was primarily the hospital and housing, this is going to create a community. So within the community, you know, there are other things that we need to consider too, the museum, parks, and so those are just kind of my comments, but I do have a specific question for you, Mr. Harris. Are you going to be developing all the market rate housing? Is Hines going to be developing all of that? So are you going to have micro units that are 650 square feet or less within those projects?
Yeah, the answer is possibly, and it's not to be evasive, but when we do a project, whether it's part of a big master plan project like this, or whether we're doing just a standalone apartment project, the first step we take is we bring in a market housing consultant that does a market study for us, and they help us identify not only the price points that can be achieved in terms of what the current market is, but they also help us with the unit mix. How many studios, how many 1 bedrooms, how many 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms? Is it a heavy family, demographic, or is it couples and working professionals? And so we do that on every project. We've actually designed in my region 2 specific micro unit projects, one in Miami and one in Raleigh. And that is something we would absolutely consider here, because we know that for many renters, they don't care what the dollars per square foot are. They write a single check every month. And so what we're trying to do is get to a chunk rent that increases the affordability, and it increases the people that would choose to live in this part of in this community and in this project. So absolutely, we're going to be looking at that.
And thank you. You said exactly what I wanted to bring out, is that, if you have smaller square footage, it becomes much more affordable. So it's not considered affordable housing, but then you're taking housing that some people that would fit into the affordable housing below the 80% or below, they could actually afford those units.
And I know this isn't part of the question you asked, but as part of the design of new multifamily communities, we put much more of an emphasis on the amenities that come with that building, because people are renting smaller apartments, so they have less spread out space in their own personal apartment. So we're creating, co-working spaces in the amenities of the building, and we're creating, more spaces for gathering within the apartment community. So we recognize that they're trading off personal square footage, but we have to give it back to them in a different way. So we put a keen focus on how do we amenitize that, so that someone doesn't just say, I'm in a 650 square foot unit and I can't do anything else.
But you're charging them for the 650 square feet.
That's correct. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It's being spread out.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask about the community that you're building in the Booker Hall? Is that going to be constructed with this project? The performing arts?
The entertainment venue that's going to be built will be part of the project, yes.
Is it built by Hines?
It probably will be built by Hines, yes.
But we don't know.
Well, actually, we're in the process now. We can't really get started because we don't have a definitive agreement with the city yet, but we're talking to any number of some of the national entertainment companies. Some of those entertainment companies like to be part of the development process. In all likelihood, we'll develop this for them, and they'll be a tenant of ours.
Last question on the African American Museum. Could you tell us the contribution by Heinz toward the construction?
Yeah, we've committed $10 million to the museum.
So they'll be responsible for fundraising for the balance.
Yes,
Is
and
the land that's located on publicly owned?
the land is part of the site that we're acquiring from the city. So we're going to allocate a portion of that site for the African American Museum.
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions? All right, so I'm looking at our agenda. It seems like we've covered timeline. We touched on AMI, unit counts, unit types, light touch on penalties.
So
I do have one question in regards to penalties. Who owns it, right? Who owns the penalty if they don't follow through? Is it Heinz or is it Rays or is it both?
So the penalties ultimately will be by the development team. So there will be an entity created that is comprised of Heinz and Rays. That penalty will be paid by that entity to the city. We will receive that as a kind of financial damage, and then we would look to invest in other affordable and workforce housing opportunities throughout the city of St. Petersburg.
I know there's no question, but I want to go back to something Commissioner Fix-Sanders, you said when I talked about working with the staff, working with the mayor. I would like Andrick to just maybe talk. We started our community outreach before the RFP came out. And so while I chose those words and you guys you didn't exist, or this esteemed group didn't exist when we started listening, something that we've been doing for more than 18 months is listening. And I think it's worth just for everybody's benefit to hear what we've done. And Ms. Gwendolyn Reese is here too, and she's been part of the leadership with Andrick in terms of our community outreach.
Thank you, Michael. And before calling up Ms. Gwen Stevenson, there were also a couple of things I wanted to address that just came up during discussion to make sure that we were clear. As Michael alluded to, and we talked about before, there were certain boundaries and barriers throughout this process that prevent us from being inclusive with most of the community. The first was the RFP process. As Michael mentioned, there were 4 different respondents. There were team members of certain teams that wouldn't communicate with others, and that caused some issues and friction, but I think we've gotten over that. We've had several community meetings, and we take on basically anyone who calls and wants us to come out and speak or engage with us virtual and in person. We've been receptive to all of those. As it relates to the supplier diversity front, just before the holidays, we held an event for about 100 to 150 people that was hosted by the Sankofa Vision Group at Tropicana Field, not only to talk about the project, but to talk more about our workforce development, how the community could really assist us to making sure that we're effective in that recruitment, to making people know that these jobs are going to be available. And also on the procurement front, letting small business know that we were going to be pretty intentional as it relates to opportunities. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be partnering with the Florida State Minority Supplier Development Council right here in St. Petersburg. They're going to be hosting their annual kickoff event. They have asked us, as well as the University of South Florida, to present on the opportunities with this project if we are fortunate enough to have it approved by council and the USF Stadium. The other 2 things I wanted to touch on, the reporting. If you read the impact report and you look at some of the actual information in there, not only are we committed to providing quarterly reports to this body and to the city, we'll also be using a weekly challenger to disseminate those quarterly reports on how we're doing with the CBA. We'll also have active information on our website. As it relates to the procurement process, we do have a heavy focus on South St. Petersburg CRA. That was actually in the RFP. That's our primary focus, but we do have secondary and tertiary focuses, with those being the city of St. Pete and all of Pinellas County. I spent a good amount of time last week meeting with different representatives from Pinellas County schools to talk about how we can get engaged with our youth, and especially on the apprenticeship side. Chair Fix-Sanders, they have 50 to 60 students currently right now in their construction apprenticeship program, and we're trying to figure out ways to matriculate them into a pathway to hopefully get them on site by this time next year as part of our workforce. The last thing on procurement, we will be accepting the City of St. Pete certification, but that will not be the only certification that we accept. We will be looking at other governmental entities and using those certifications if entities have those, as well as working with the Florida State Minority Supplier Development Council and doing some of our certifications on our own. Yes,
Andrew,
Mr. Mathis.
I just want to, I want to express a concern, and it's not about your presentation. I think you have done an exceptional job. And I think this was clearly the winning proposal, and you all have worked really hard to come up with a great product. I think Mr. Harrison has years of experience, understands this, and I think, and I believe you. Like when you say you want to do this stuff, I think that's absolutely true. When I think about the Rays team, like I know Brian and Matt and Melanie and Razzie, I know them, and I know that they want to do the right thing. And when I think about Miss Gwen, like I would take a bullet for Miss Gwen. I have no question about this team's interest and commitment and wanting to do the right thing. But I also know the history of this site, and I know that 40 years ago, all these promises were made that weren't fulfilled. And the concern I have is that we sign off on something, the city agrees to something, and then it becomes inconvenient to fulfill the commitments that are made. And it's less expensive to not fulfill the commitments that are made. And I guess that's the point that I'm at, is signing off on a deal that seems to be like a good deal, but just having the assurance that the promises that are made this time are actually kept. And I feel like I need to express that, because it's something I take very, very seriously, and I want to make sure that that happens. So anyway, sorry for the emotion, but that's where I'm at.
Thank you. No, we need that emotion, because what we're experiencing is real. You know, a lot of us weren't here to go through that, and so for us to be, I'm trying to find the correct word, nonchalant or lackadaisical in regards to the value and the importance of what it is that we're about to embark on in this particular project. And again, which is why I stress so many times, yes, we are advisory. And Lord knows the mayor's office did a fantastic job in regards to outreach. So when I said listen to the mayor, listen to staff, but not listen to residents, there was so much outreach, so many town halls, so many opportunities to provide input, feedback. We gave those opportunities out there, and I don't think there's anybody that can say we did not ask for that feedback. But now we're here at this point in time, and I just want to make sure that there's no doubt you guys are fantastic, fantastic. Andrew, you've gone above and beyond, and I do appreciate you for that. I appreciate everything that you all have done to try to convince us that we're going to get these things done. And I think you've heard me say, if it's not written, it's not going to happen. And once it's written, that's the only thing that's enforceable. So that's why I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to go over this, but also to have that welcoming response that you hear this committee and that you hear what it is that we're asking to be done. So question for you, Andrew. You said that the quarterly report was going to be on our website. Our website is which website?
So we will be hosting a website for the project. Now, once the data is provided to the city and to this committee, of course, you're free to do with whatever you choose to once you get it. But we have made a commitment to make sure that we're hosting this information on our website.
Okay, and so that same report will be available on the city's website, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I say that to say, we moving on?
Yeah, if no one else has anything else, we can move.
Would this body like to hear from Ms. Gwen Reese? We brought her all over here. Okay.
Oh, yeah, moving on.
Absolutely. We're at restorative actions. Descendant.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's my understanding you wanted to hear a little bit about how we have been doing outreach and communication with gas plant residents and descendants. So I will be happy to answer any questions, but first, if I may, Jason, promises were two promises were made 40 years ago. Nothing specific. Okay, just overall, better housing and some employment. Never did the city get to the point where we are now with specific promises that we can be held accountable for. So yes, that's the past, and the past is very important. I'm a historian, I know that. I appreciate that. But there's a distinct difference between those very loose promises 40 years ago and what we're promising together now. So I will be happy to answer any questions that you have about what we have done and continue to do regarding engagement of the gas plant residents and descendants. I am one of them. And it's always been very important to me that their voices be heard. We were not heard 40 years ago. We are being heard now. And not just voices heard, but to be actively engaged and involved in the processes. It's real important that that history is remembered and commemorated. And the only way you can do that is by engaging people who have lived experiences with those neighborhoods and with what happened there. So we are committed, and I am very committed that we preserve that history. And in some of our meetings and dinners, and when we bring people together, we don't have an ulterior motive. We're not trying to buy support. And all of the gas plant residents don't support us. Let's be very clear. We are not monolithic at all. But what we're doing is showing and telling and proving that we are sincere about engaging, listening to, valuing, and respecting the voices of the people who were most impacted. So we hear a lot of things. I think just a couple of weeks ago, we had a large group of gas plant residents and descendants meeting with Hood's Design out of Oakland, California. That was an important meeting. They were very, very appreciative of being a part of it. And they made suggestions that were listened to and heard, and we're looking forward to them being implemented. So we're not just talking it, we're walking it, because I don't just talk, I talk and walk. So it's real important to me that we are there, we are heard, we are appreciated, we have things to say. And one of the things that has been a message from the gas plant residents and descendants is we don't want our stories lost. We want the history to remain. The way history is in this state and country today, it's whitewashed, it's omitted. Our story is important. Our stories matter. So we're working very closely to make sure that whatever happens there also includes the story and the history of this vibrant, rich neighborhood. Now, I said I was going to answer questions, but then I started talking. But you got a question, Gloria?
I do.
Yes.
Matter of fact,
Yes.
I ended it on last meeting.
Yes.
Because when I hear the word restorative, it says to me that we're going to put things back. We're gonna make things right. And so my question is, what attempts, if any, or had it even been considered to take a look at residents that with their businesses that were there? There were churches that were there. Any attempt to restore those, give them an opportunity to participate, both as property owners, as investors, as the dollars that could be used to be part of this. What to me that's really, it's what happened in the past. It's great that we want to make it different. But the bottom line is, if we're talking about economic reparation, I know that's a bad word, but I use it, economic reparation. If we're talking about restoring people, we're talking about creating generational wealth, we got to give something back to something that was taken other than just a job or a hope of a job. So to me, if there is a missing piece, and maybe it was talked about, maybe it was, it can't be part, maybe it's never going to be a part, but I just feel it's something that needs to be talked about. It's something that is very much on my heart. And I did have an opportunity, I was a new salesperson with Xerox, and when that whole thing happened with the gas plant. And I remember driving through roads and seeing people sitting there crying and hearing those horrible stories about people whose lives were just shoved by a bulldozer. People sitting on a stoop, the house is gone. And so to me, you know, there's a healing that has to take place. There's a restoration that has to take place, and recognizing that is great, but also there's an economic piece, I think.
And may I?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so in part of what we're doing when we talk about equity, we're looking at something, I think Nikki Gaskin Capehart named it, a legacy housing, as it relates to those who once lived there. But there are efforts on our part, whether it's business owners, whether it's owning or renting. Of course, the churches are not going to move back, okay? But there are efforts, and we listen. And part of engaging those who were impacted is to hear what they think about how we can move forward with this restorative justice that you're talking about. That word is actually my word. That language is in our proposal because it's something I suggested and talked about at length. How we do that is not up to us. How we do that is up to the community, and more specifically to those who were impacted. So that's why their voices are important. We have a person whose
And
grandfather.
How did you get that information? What they wanted, the community?
We're still getting it.
Oh, okay. All right. So
It
not
hasn't
done yet.
stopped. No.
Oh, okay.
And it will not stop. We are committed throughout the 20-year process. There's a place in every part of this process where the community's voice and the residents' voice will be needed and will be heard. We have a person who's very active with us. His grandfather owned Better Way Cleaners. He owns Better Way Catering and Barbecue. He is so interested in having his business in this development, so are we. There are others who they did not have businesses, but they're descendants of people who did. If they're interested, we want to hear from them. We want to work with them. We want to help them be able to have a business in this development. I would love to live in the development. I mean, so there are many people who don't want to live there. When we talk about affordable housing, we don't want a project. So if we have too much of what we're calling affordable housing all clumped together, we're looking at a project. We don't need a Cabrini Greens. Nobody wants that. When we talk to people about housing, they like the idea of the various economic pieces of the housing, whatever the language may be. That's not my expertise, but the low income, the affordable, the market rate, all of that, that's a community. The gas plant area wasn't solely affordable housing. We had 2-story brick mansions next to ranch homes, next to apartments. We had slum housing in there too. I always say that African Americans are the first models for mixed income neighborhoods in the country because redlining forced that. We all had to live together.
We created it.
Right.
The workplace.
Yes, yes. And so we're not looking for that development to be full of affordable housing. We're looking for the same kind of community we had with mixed income. Our community had schools, businesses. Michael has mentioned all of that. We were a 5-minute neighborhood, not a 20-minute neighborhood. We could go anywhere and get anything within a 5-minute walk. When we think about our community, that's what we think about. When we talk about restorative, that's part of it. You're restoring our community. You're restoring us to the community we once had. And it was a community. And in other language, it was a village. So when we talk about affordable housing and when we talk about solving the problems, the first Black person came here in 1868. That was 156 years ago. We cannot solve 150 years of problems in one project. Right. This is the first time in my 74 years of living in the city of St. Pete that I have seen any kind of substantive program or project move forward that's moving us towards equity. So will we get there totally? Absolutely not. No one project can, but we are taking a first step. We are setting, it's our intent to do such a good job that we're setting a model for all of the other redevelopment that will come in the future. We may not get there 100%, but we will sure move the needle more than it's ever been moved before. So and we do, we continue to engage, and we're building, I'm building, what do you call it? A spreadsheet, a whole of gas plant residents and descendants. 5 or more every week. I'm learning of new people and we're adding them to our spreadsheet so we can grow this community of former residents and descendants. it is important to us because we're proud of our neighborhood. Deborah, did you live there briefly, or someone in your family in the gas plant?
We were Laurel Park a little bit, yeah, Laurel
Oh,
Park.
okay. And Laura Park is part of what we always say, gas plant and Laura Park, because they were displaced too. But it's important to us that we come together so that we have a voice, not just individual voices, those are important, but voices as gas plant, Laura Park residents and descendants, so that you can hear from us, you can talk to us, the team can hear from us, they can talk to us. And they have been doing that. And that's part of my job, is to ensure, and I don't have to fight with them to do this. They're very willing to do this, that we constantly include those who were most impacted, because who knows better what is needed? Who knows better the impacts, like you said, of the people that you would see crying? I do want to say that everybody it was not a horrible story for everybody. There are many people who ended up being able to buy homes. But see, everybody in there did not own their home, so they weren't compensated the same way. If you were a renter, your compensation was virtually nothing. So those are some of the people that we really want to hear from and ask them what the experiences have been and what is it we can do. How do they see us as a team, as city government, and as a community addressing some of those needs?
I do have a comment slash at the end
Yes, Ms.
question.
Matthews.
So, I always say to myself, I am not from St. Pete. I'm an immigrant, Jamaican born. And I always say that um, until you have experienced something, your voice is just what you've heard someone else's voice is. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to come and lend your voice, not just of what you heard, but what you know to be absolutely accurate. Um, and when I think of restorative, I'm like Miss Gloria, and so my mind leans towards something that I even read in something of all the stuff that Mr. Dick Pierce, who I love you, Dick. Just I want to go on the record to say that, because he will email me about Jesus, Lord, Father God. So he mentioned something about a housing trust fund, or a housing equity trust, or something along those lines. And I am saying, in the conversations, Ms. Gwen, that you're having with the descendants, has that ever come up? Has anyone ever said that they would appreciate an opportunity for this particular project to pour back into something, so that the ones that will come in 20 plus years will be able to reach back and benefit from it?
Absolutely.
I pray that you're here in 20 years. But just for the record, we need a Gwen Reese to follow you after this. But many of us won't be.
Yeah.
And this is a project that will pass us in lifetimes. And so I want to make sure, or I want to know if there has been anyone that has leaned in and lent the voice to something similar to that.
No, the answer is no.
Okay.
And what I want to say to you is thank you.
Absolutely.
Because we don't just depend on them to come to us, we go to them with ideas as well.
Mhm.
So Michael, the whole team is here and we're hearing you.
Yeah.
This is the conversation we will take to them
Thank you.
and ask them about it. So I want to say thank you for bringing that up, because they haven't brought it to us, but we will take it to them.
All right. Thank you for that.
I want to say,
Awesome.
and before you leave, again, I want to thank you. Miss Gwen, you know, and you just brought something that I didn't know. So a lot of us, when we say not listening to the constituents, the residents, we don't know what you're doing on that side. We don't know the conversations that you're having on that side. And imagine the impact, myself, when we hear that those conversations are taking place, when we hear that those efforts are being made. So we're working with information we've been provided. So let me just go ahead and make that clear. You don't know what you don't know. So your presence here said a lot, and it meant a lot. And I appreciate what it brought to the table in that conversation. Ms. Campbell is absolutely right. When I hear restorative, I didn't think it was a restorative project. I thought it was the steps I'm taking today. I'm prayerful that they're going to benefit my granddaughters tomorrow. So we're legacy building because we're working on and off of a legacy. So the restorative piece, I was trying to figure out that word and how it was restorative, but we can restore the opportunities that were taken away.
Right.
And I think that's how I looked at it.
And
So
we can restore the pride.
yeah.
We can restore the history.
Mhm.
We can restore all of that. So when we say restorative, that's not what we meant when we said it. We meant a lot of what you meant too, Gloria. But there's a lot to be restored. And a lot of what we hear when we have the residents and descendants together is no one knows what happened. People have forgotten. We don't want people to forget.
Right.
We want people to remember. So that's part of restoring the respect and the pride and the history. It's a major part of what happened in this city. It's a part of our history, and everyone needs to know it. Everyone needs to know it, because if you don't know it, it can be repeated. It can. I want to thank you, Esther. I really do, for what you suggested. Michael's sitting here and he's nodding. We're going to take this back and have a conversation. But I want you to know that we're meeting almost, well, now I think, Alex, I think we're going to be planning almost meeting with our descendants and residents on a monthly basis, having them meet with the different team members and have something to say about the different parts of what we're doing and how we're moving forward. But Deborah, I want to thank you, because I think one of the things that I will do is take advantage of my ability to write for the Weekly Challenger. And I think that's a good way for the community to know how we are interacting with the residents and descendants. So I thank you for saying, until I was here to say this, you did not know. There are ways for us to let the community know what we're doing and how we're engaging the descendants and residents. So I'm sort of committing to that. Yeah, I am committing to that, to at least monthly sort of give an update. So you hear the voices, see the faces of some of the people that we're working with. I want to share with you one last thing. There could be someone older, we don't know, but the oldest resident of the gas plant neighborhood that we know is Malachi Walker, and he will be 100 years old on July 4th of this year. I just identified another person I'd known all my life, but she lived in the gas plant area before my time, and her name is Catherine Boyd Jones, and she will be 98 on April 19th. So we're talking, those are so far the two oldest that we've identified, and they are very involved. And I'm so very proud of that. So those are the kind of stories that we can share with the community, as well as let you know how we're engaging with the
So
residents.
when you may be here then, and 20 said Esther was trying
Well,
to
they'll
get
live,
along.
yeah.
And
I would be 94, yeah. I plan to be here.
And Esther, I would say that actually 2 weeks ago, the community trust, I had emailed Brian the same information about, had that been a consideration or was that on the table? So so it is not a novel idea. It is an idea that other communities are using.
Yes.
And so I think it is one that deserves
Yes.
some thought. Yes, definitely.
Did I answer? Yes, Ruth.
To both of you, employment restorative enterprise is one, using your word. And it's, there's a couple of programs here. One is mentorship, apprenticeship, and then there's another employment one that has internships. And they use the word training. And I'm a teacher. I think that's all wonderful. But I'm wondering if there's a plan to help these people have the job, including a job with this program. You know, you get trained, but you need, in these descendants, it's great they're training them, but you need to have a job that follows that.
Thank you, Dr. Whitney. We talked a little bit more just about listening, and I know some of this is a little bit different from what was in the impact report versus what we presented last week. When we talk about restorative enterprise and what we're calling the apprentice matching, that is a job on job matching. That is a small business owner who has 5 to 6 employees, matching with a larger business owner who's in the same line of discipline, learning from that business. We talk about apprenticeships. We're talking about the true workforce and true jobs, right?
I know about that.
I just want to make sure that we
Yeah,
those
we get them
distinction
hired, but I
between
was
those
worried
two.
About the mentors and the interns.
Okay, so on the mentorship side, again, from a technical piece, we're trying to make sure that we have the students that are getting what we're calling these interns on the job training. The next path for them is to figure out what they want to do in life at that point. We're exposing them to different things on site to see if they want to maybe go to the craft apprenticeship site and really learn how to use their hands, or if they want to go to school. These are going to be wraparound services. It's not just the fact that we're giving these kids opportunities for internships. We want to give them opportunities for not only employment, but opportunities to get into our enterprise and business ownership program as well.
But they're not actually working on your project. They're not being hired by you in what you're building.
Our first line of entry will be for our business partners. So these are the people that will be working on our projects. That is correct. Those could anybody from general contractors to electricians to plumbers to accountants. I mean, those are our first lines of partnerships. Once we've exhausted that, we'll be depending on people like Mr. Mathis and the St. Pete Economic Development Council, as well as the St. Pete Chamber, to also utilize those partnerships and businesses for internship opportunities.
Well, thanks, Gwen, for all you've done.
Thank you. Okay, no more questions?
Nope.
Oh, that was easy.
We did good. We did good.
Thank you guys. Really, really appreciate it. Wow, this has been a healthy dialogue. Public comments.
I'll be here all night. Oh, yeah.
I want to go on the record for city staff. Feel free to provide us dinner at any time. Thank you. All righty. So first up, we have Frank Carrillo. Mr. Carrillo, 3 minutes. If you can state your name and address for the record.
Frank Cirillo, 1400.
Cirillo, my
Yeah, no,
apologies.
it's okay. 1400 Gandy Boulevard, Unit 406, St. Pete, 33702. Hello. Today we heard a lot about numbers, including an appraisal that values this 76.19 acres of land at around $330 million. According to a St. Pete Rising article on January 3rd, 2024, the nearby 0.77 acres at 155 17th Street South, which is 50 feet away from the 76 acres, sold for roughly $9 million and is to be used for market rate residential units. Per acre, that comes out to $11.68 million. Now multiply that by 76 acres, and that makes the gas plant worth $890 million at best use. You would have to value the land at $1.5 million an acre to get to a $105 million valuation, or more than an 85% discount from market rate. I was going to talk more about recommendations to this board, including language of the contract, but I think trying to take a different approach and get flies with honey and tell my story is more appropriate. I think we have a better use here. We could use Albert Whitted Airport to make this dream happen. The city's already conducted a feasibility study on that land. The land can never be developed for residential use because it's so close to the water and the usage acreage is larger than the gas plant. The Rays could build a stadium on the water that is comparable to the Giant Stadium in San Francisco, and also incorporate seating that could double as usage for the Grand Prix. This could also increase financing opportunities for the Rays by allowing them to partner with the Grand Prix businesses and have a one-of-a-kind sports stadium that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, thus becoming an attraction of itself. This frees up the entire gas plant to be redeveloped into mixed-use residential, commercial, and community spaces that serve all the residents and not just the ones that benefit from this deal. With direct investment into neighborhoods that it once destroyed, the city could make a real dent in tackling the housing crisis and have an awesome new venue for the Rays and the Grand Prix for decades to come. I've talked to this body twice, and as an economist by profession, I focused on the numbers, but I'm going to focus on my personal story. According to Fannie Mae, the 2024 AMI in St. Petersburg is $89,400. I make 130% of that, and I still have $63,000 in student loans at 7.2% for my master's degree, a car payment, insurance, healthcare, and groceries. I can barely afford to pay rent, and if I want to buy, I can't afford anything outside of a 40-year-old or older 41-bedroom condo. I still can't afford that though, because I can't save enough for a down payment and I make too much to qualify for down payment assistance. For a 29-year-old man, I'm in the 87th percentile for salary. So just think about the other 87% who are doing worse off than me. I still haven't mentioned housing supply. Go on Zillow or MLS and there isn't any. So this deal is a slap in the face to any working person who pays taxes. Why are we subsidizing a billion-dollar corporation and not actually helping citizens? I urge this body to make more affordable housing and to sell the land at a reasonable number. And if you don't, to not recommend this deal at all. Let the Rays stay in the stadium that is already built.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Cirillo. Next up, we have Bryce Springfield. Bryce, you have 3 minutes. If you can state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name's Bryce Springfield, 11850 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Street North. I'm here to express opposition to the current proposal as it stands now, where the city plans to subsidize hundreds of millions for minimal affordable housing and selling off our valuable public land. At Mayor Welch's community conversations, the official report published by the city noted that members of the community overwhelmingly called for the development of city-owned social housing, which is permanently affordable. The top 3 responses related to housing costs were affordability, mixed income, and basing housing costs on actual income, not AMI. The top responses under housing considerations included land trust for a portion or all of the total acreage, keep all land city-owned, address homelessness, no builder tax credits or short-term affordable units, and social housing on city-owned land. This plan obviously does not keep the land city-owned. It doesn't develop social housing on city-owned land, but most central, it is not affordable and certainly not permanently affordable. We're talking about 5% of units being affordable for 60% AMI, nothing for 30% or 50%. And in the long run, once this contract is over, these units are more than likely going to go back to market rate. The city will have no permanent stake or ownership over the housing to satisfy community need. And additionally, public-private stadium deals in general in this country rarely live up to their promises in other cities. And Ruth was correct to point out that the plan asks for 10% of units at 80% AMI or below. While 38% of residents fit in that category, they still have clauses to let them off the hook if they pay a comparatively small penalty. And I can speak from personal experience. My household was homeless just a couple years ago, and now we're on a fixed income that is unlikely to allow us to continue living in the city much longer. These affordable units are not affordable for my family, and they're not affordable for most of the classmates who I grew up with in the high school that I went to here. So, I mean, that does not demonstrate to me that this is a big enough benefit to the community that we should subsidize it to the hundreds of millions. The Rays have more than enough resources to fund their own project if we do this, while we are still struggling with affordable housing. We're not asking how hard it is for the investor or for Heinz Rays. We're asking if it's efficient use of public funds. And from my perspective, we're absolutely not there with this deal. Other cities around the world have certainly found it reasonable and achievable to establish robust social housing programs owned by the public. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Alexa Manning. Ms. Manning, if you could state your name and address in the microphone for the record.
My name is Alexa Manning. I live at 3480 14th Avenue South. I don't want to sound like a beaten horse up here as far as what I have to say to my own personal story. Living here in St. Pete, growing up as a resident. Again, my name is Alexa Manning. I am a lifelong resident of St. Petersburg, Florida. I grew up red line between the lines of Central. I got to go up to Central, back to 26th Avenue South, and from 49th Street to 4th Street South. That was the box that I actually grew up in. I wasn't allowed to live outside of that area. During the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we were not allowed to live outside of that area, as I just mentioned. But the gas plant was our true Black community, a community where we supported ourselves. We were all, well, the whole Black community from that box that I just stated, we were able to sustain and take care of ourselves in that. And we never actually got to truly see myself coming up, growing up in the city, to be a part of the city of St. Petersburg. I was completely redlined. I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things. I wasn't allowed to go a lot of places. Starting with downtown St. Pete. I was not allowed to be downtown St. Pete. I was not allowed to live in any areas outside of my target area. So with the community that I lived in all my life, to just see it being raped from under me is as much as I've seen it do all my life, is very hardening. It hurts. It hurts to see my community just be targeted for most projects here in the city. And it's something that I get to watch, and something I have watched almost my entire life. But here nor there, back to where I was again. We had our own Black-owned stores. We had our own Black-owned grocery stores. We had plenty of home ownerships when I was growing up in our Black community, as well as churches. The city of St. Petersburg, again, had promised to redevelop that gas plant area for basically the community to return. I mean, I know I've heard her story that wasn't so. I've heard that wasn't quite how it's supposed to go, but in all my upbringing, that was how it's supposed to go. We were told that was going to be redeveloped, and we were going to have the opportunity to be back in that area. So we were always displaced. But again, the gas plant, oh, my 3 minutes up already?
Thank you so
Wait,
much.
Oh, Lord.
Ms.
Goes so
Thank
fast.
you.
Esther,
I know.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. Can she ask a question?
So I'm curious, what do you think would be a better use of that area? If you're talking about a lost community, is this not trying to reestablish that community that would be open to everyone? Is there
Yes.
something that you think is a better?
I mean, I don't feel that it should just be limited to what's opening, but I don't feel that we should be left out completely, as I felt I've done all my life. But I feel that a lot of things we should be considered in some of the projects, as far as business owners, definitely. Part as we getting the training to meet all this letters that I quite don't understand yet, the AMI, all that type of stuff. We don't have that training. That was never opportunity. That was never given to us. It was
Okay,
never
so-
set up for us to be able to afford some of this stuff that was coming in the future because of us being in just a certain area.
So do you recognize that that this body is trying to address some of those issues, or do you think we're missing anything in particular?
I don't see a whole lot as far as addressing what I've seen taken away and what I see now is being given. I don't see a whole lot for my community to be a part of that. No.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So much. So next up, we have Dylan, and I do not know if this is a D or an O. Ditmus? Dames? Mr. Dames, state your name and write bigger on your
My name is Dylan Dames. I live at 12001 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Street North. Yeah, I'd be here. I wanted to speak a little bit to conversations earlier about affordable housing, and I understand that this is a mixed-use development and that affordable housing isn't what brings all other partners to the table. From my experience, It's been people like Alexa who have made me feel as an immigrant like I have a voice in St. Pete, and that what I want for myself and Gen Z matters. The long history of resistance and the capacity to find joy and support each other in a time so much harsher than mine. So I'm obviously worried about the council's conversations with the developer, badgering the developer when the developer does not have responsibility to me. The developer doesn't have a responsibility to us. And I think we run the risk of wasting 4 weeks if we spend time with this line of questioning. I think we should just address our council, address our leadership. Those are the people that have a responsibility to us. The developer has a responsibility to profit. And if working class people, if residents have to keep advocating for what they need while imagining and accepting how an outside developer can profit, we're not going to keep coming to these meetings. It's exhausting. We're beyond capacity to think critically about how we fight for what we need while still sitting through and listening to and trying to imagine ways that this thing works for people to go home with money in their pocket. All we know is what we need. All we know is what we need. And I think affordable housing is a very, very serious consideration. These are findings that the mayor had, right, on his tour where he talked to the community. The community asked him to prioritize residents over tourists and developers, and he published that on his website, right? And we talked to the mayor at the beginning of the summer, and he told us we were late. And I've heard that argument from more than just the mayor, right? So I think with the project that had its first public airing of the term sheet in October and its first meeting where you were present in December, any argument that we're late or that the cake is baked or to ask for something will have some kind of weird domino effect on something else. That shows me that we're not really serious about community input. Why are we here then? So I just rest my case.
Thank you, Mr. Dance. Next up, we have Peter Kent. Mr. Kent, when you get to the mic, if you can state your name and address for the record.
Peter Kent, 8 Academy Way. And what else do you need?
That's it.
That's it? Okay. I'd like to talk about what I heard Kari mention tonight was the CBAC is to analyze whether the Rays Hines benefit match the city's investment in the deal. And I do not think they come even close. The first speaker tonight, well, the first commenter tonight mentioned that a parcel just off the edge of this parcel sold for 11 million an acre. I've looked up 3 other parcels that are currently listed and their average listing price is 12 million an acre. And you multiply those numbers times the 86 acres, or as you said, 81 acres. 81 acres, it comes up to $900 million. If the city got $900 million for selling this land, it could easily put $250 million, $250 million into a housing assistance program. It could easily pay the $50,000 of community benefits, and it would still have money left over to pay for roads, water, sewer, infrastructure improvements, which are badly needed. This project, what I would do with this project is I would put the whole 81 or 86 acres up for sale, and hopefully Hines would bid on it. I think Hines is an excellent developer. Let Hines bid on it. Let everybody else bid on it. Try to get close to your $900 million that you could get. Have no restriction other than the apprentice and minority, the same thing the city has normally, and see what you could get out of the parcel. I think you'd get an awful lot of money, and then I think you could take that awful lot of money and put it into a trust fund for affordable housing. And what I'd like to see is a lot of that money go into South St. Petersburg to rehabilitate existing structures and turn them into housing and to help people in South St. Petersburg buy their rental or you give them a down payment benefit, 10% down payment, just co-invest with them for 10%, them get their house and start making intergenerational wealth, because that's how all of us made it. And I think you'd be a lot happier with the end project. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have James Kidder. James Kidder.
It's in the overflow.
He may be in the overflow.
All right, we'll come back to him. Justin Cornoyer. James or Justin? All right. State your name and address in the microphone for the record, please.
My name's Justin Cornway. I'm a resident of 1026 9th Avenue South, Campbell Park. So I walk out my front door and the Tropicana field is right there in front of my house. Live in the shadow of it, if you will. I've lived in Campbell Park for 4 years now. Getting to know my neighbors has been a great joy, and learning about the history of the gas plant site and the people displaced there. Learning from historians has been enlightening. The people that were displaced from the gas plant didn't, some went far, but some stayed close. Some went just south to Campbell Park, to my neighborhood. People converted porches into bedrooms to be able to accommodate these people. Family members that lived in Campbell Park and neighborhood south. We talk a lot about what's gone, what's not there anymore. Those people are still with us, right? And there are also structures that are still with us. In that era of displacement and urban renewal is what they called it. We built structures that are still with us. We built the interstate system. So we built I-175 is the highway that I see at the border, the north border of my neighborhood. It's a concrete wall that separates me from this $6 billion possible development in my neighborhood. And it's a monument to structural racism that existed and still exists in our city. There's a huge movement in the United States to correct those wrongs and to grapple with those mistakes that we made and to dismantle those monuments of structural racism. Pete Buttigieg is part of the big bipartisan infrastructure bill to take down these monuments. So one idea I have and a benefit that I could see that my community could get out of this, 20-year investment process that we're about to embark on is there's 26 acres in the middle of 175. We take 175 down to the street level. We make it a boulevard. We reconnect those neighborhoods together that were once a part of the grid. There's 26 acres that we can work with after that. Grants have been applied for. We have FDOT funding. We're looking for US DOT funding, but I just want it to be a consideration of how do we connect our neighborhoods back together? How is that wall that divides us? How can we think about what our future looks like without that wall? How do we, 10% of my neighborhood doesn't have a car. 85% of my neighborhood lives in poverty. They need access to these jobs, and social mobility is as simple as mobility, being able to get to where you need to go. So how do I get from Campbell Park to the gas plant? How do my neighbors benefit from that in a safe way and not having to cross over an interstate? So food for thought.
I have a question. Mr. Cornway.
Oh, yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I agree with you about the interstate, about I-175, but I just want for clarification, Brian, can you clarify this? That would be an FDOT project. It cannot be part of what we're considering because that's totally separate. I mean, hopefully eventually it will happen, but I just want for clarification purposes, can you confirm or?
That is correct. So ultimately that would be at the discretion of FDOT. What to do with that interstate as it is an FDOT property. We did have the downtown mobility study that was done by Forward Pinellas that made a series of recommendations related to 175. We continue to have discussions with Forward Pinellas, our MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, as well as FDOT and city administration on what the potential options are. But realistically, that is going to be a longer time frame than what it would take for this project to necessarily get to city council and ultimately get started. It would certainly be one of the many things that we are looking at, and there have been a lot of recommendations made and a lot of public comment received as to how we can improve that connection. And it's certainly something that administration cares very strongly about. Is there's a reason why 375 you can easily get under it and connect the neighborhoods to the north, and there was a strategic decision made why you can't do that on the south, and we're certainly looking for ways to correct that. But that is ultimately beyond the charge of what Rays Hines would be able to do, because it is multi-partners and would be a longer effort and longer conversation with FDOT.
So I just wanted to make that clarification, and hopefully one day it will happen.
Or is there
That would
something
be great.
temporary that we can propose, like a pedestrian bridge improvement?
I think
over
there is a
175?
pedestrian bridge in the
this project?
proposal.
There is, yeah.
Just one.
There is, okay.
That's correct. There is one that is part of the proposal now to replace the existing one over 175, which
Yeah,
I
it's very sad.
commend any brave souls that would cross that. But we are always looking for other ideas and options, and so thank you
Fully
for
in
that
support of a
input.
new pedestrian bridge over the interstate.
Thank you so much. Next we have Franklin Alves or Alves. All right, state your name and address in the mic.
Franklin Alves, 1244 9th Avenue South, St. Petersburg. I also live in Campbell Park, and I am actually one of the few people that braved to take that overpass. I sent an email earlier with some images and some kind of ideas of what can happen. And I think there's a lot of talk about kind of the fruits of Tropicana Field, if we say, but I really want to kind of not forget the roots of it. And so that's kind of what I was hoping that the committee could consider as part of just like remembering the roots of where all those people were displaced. They all moved south for the most part. And for me, living in Campbell Park, me and my neighbor's connection to downtown, to St. Pete, is a barbed wire bridge that is covered in graffiti, in mess. It is only for the brave. And any other way into downtown is a series of disconnected roads, sidewalks that just dead end. We have kids in our neighborhood who actually don't have a direct, safe path to get to their elementary school, which is absurd to me. In the city's plan, there's already a series of greenways that can connect our neighborhood, 13th Street Heights, Melrose Mercy, and all the other neighborhoods south together into what I'm proposing, like a game day trail or kind of a prosperity trail, so that people who do get jobs in these areas don't necessarily need to be bankrupted by owning a vehicle. And so I think that would just provide a huge benefit for me, for my neighbors, to be able to have just such a safe access to the new proposed trail and or the new, it would be great to have the trail, but the new Tropicana Field and all of the jobs and opportunity that comes with it. So
thank you so much. Next up, we have Douglas Jackson. Mr. Jackson, if you can state your name and address while we start the timer.
Thank you, Douglas Jackson, 2927 8th Street South. First, I'd like to thank the council for being here. It's a big sacrifice to volunteer this much time, and I think it's very important. I certainly learned a lot tonight. This is my first time coming to these meetings, and I hope you learned a lot as well. One of the things that this discussion, I think it was a very good discussion, gave me is the belief that this council does actually want to recommend this project in some capacity. Maybe Mr. Nissen wants more tweaks than Mr. Mathis does, but I do think that the council does want to recommend this in some capacity. And I do think that's right, because as Mr. Mathis and Ms. Reeser kind of alluded to, we probably need to do something. Something's better than nothing. Ms. Campbell said, I think, I'm paraphrasing maybe, but we get as good as we can and then we move forward. And I think that's exactly right. As we learned tonight, there's a lot that's gone into this project. 11 months of negotiation, 18 months of listening. We didn't talk about the cost of what this project looks like. And if this project were not to go forward, what's the alternative? Market residential? I don't really want more of that. That's just me. This project has a lot of community benefits. It's going to basically activate 86 acres into a community space. If you look at it right now, when there's no game there, there's nothing going on. You might get a couple bikes on the Pinellas Trail. That's going to change. It's going to connect the north, the south, the east, and the west. It's going to have mixed use. It's going to have museums, music halls, Woodson African American Museum, Campbell Park Center. Currently, right there, there's no residential options whatsoever, and we're going to have some. Now, there's a saying that perfection is the enemy of progress, and I think if we don't move forward on this in some capacity, that's exactly right. Now, do we want more affordable housing? Absolutely. But we're going to have 1,200 units of affordable or workforce housing, not market rate residential there. So this is better than nothing. Are we going to have a better pedestrian bridge? Only one, but it's better than what we have now. So you look at these things and you think about the change that this is going to make. And it's not perfect, no, but perfection is the enemy of progress. So Rays Hines has kept a open and continual dialogue with, I know, the Edge District, I think the community. I mean, they're sitting here tonight, and Council Person Fig Sanders, I know you said you're trying to convince us. Well, I think that communications, dialogues, working with you goes a long way to convincing. It's not going to be done until it's done. Things can change, but they're working with us now, and any other developer may not. So I think that's important. Again, there's already been substantial time and money invested into this, and any improvement we can have is better than what we have now. So I would urge this council to remember when making its recommendation that perfection is the enemy of progress.
Thank you
and I
so
would
much.
encourage you to recommend this moving forward.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Wendy Snyder. Wendy, if you can state your name and address in the microphone for the record.
Yes, ma'am. Wendy Snyder, 6407 Sandpiper Way South in St. Petersburg. And I brought with me, and I hope each of you have it, a sheet that elaborates on the numbers that I gave the council last week. The significant one being the fact that there are 18,140 households who make less than 80% AMI and who are renters and who pay more than 30% of their income for rent. So they are making less than 80% and they are rent burdened. And I think that's the number that's really important for this, for when we consider what the city's needs for affordable housing are. And as was said earlier this evening, this isn't the last time the council is going to have to deal with that need. We're not going to solve it, even if Hines makes all of the units affordable. So I think that the methodology by which we calculate what the city's need is really needs to be transparent. And respectfully, I would request the opportunity to meet with the city staff person most familiar with the numbers that you put up on the screen, which haven't been made online yet, so I didn't get a chance to study them. But I'd really like a meeting so that we can understand and compare our methodologies and maybe just agree finally, what is the need? What is the number? That would be great. I would really appreciate that. I'd also like to echo Council Member Figgs Sanders' request that Hines come back to us and show us what it would look like to move some of those 100 to 120% AMI units back into the 80% category. And also further, what it would look like to build 40% of the 6,000 units as affordable. And by affordable, I mean below 80% AMI. I'd like Hines to come back and show us what that would really mean and essentially put some proof to this contention that they can't do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Jeremy Tolley. Tolley, if you could state your name and address in the microphone for the record.
My name
name's Jeremy Tolberg. I live at 417 Lido Way. First, I'd like to thank everyone on the committee for dedicating your time and energy. I know this is an important decision, one worth debating and scrutinizing closely, but unfortunately that doesn't make it an easy one. And this is an important decision, one that promises to impact everyone in the city for the next 30 years. Not only are we evaluating whether a private baseball stadium should be built with over $1.6 billion in public funds, we're also debating whether such an immense and costly investment will provide any of the promised benefits. It's been encouraging to hear as many of you have started to seriously question the numbers and claims being made by those who champion this proposal. Some of the claims seem incredibly optimistic or purely fabricated. We have job numbers that can't be guaranteed, we have environmental benefits that can't be assessed, or we have economic boosts to local businesses that can't be measured. And some of the claims we're hearing, like those to provide wider public benefits or affordable housing, are made with such huge caveats, long timelines, or trivial penalties that we can almost guarantee that they will be of no importance in the final project. Councilwoman Sanders wondered why we're here if all of this has already been decided, and I'd say that's the question that answers itself. This deal's being pushed through with some hurried public meetings to give it a veneer of legitimacy. Instead, we're being asked to rush into a deal, not worry about the fine print, and agree to the first set of demands. Where I'm from, when someone asks for money in a hurry without a lot of details and tells you to not read any of the fine print, it means you're about to get hustled. This project would act as an indirect tax on every household in the city. Not only will we incur enormous debt to finance it, the payments of that huge sum of money will act as a siphon for tax money that's needed to ensure the safety, health, and quality of life for everyone in the city. And in that respect, this project risks repeating the exact same injustices of the original gas plant area, giving higher priority to powerful interests over the needs of the citizens. If we want to build affordable housing in this city, we can do that without a stadium. If we want to fund green spaces and parks for everyone to enjoy, we can do that without a stadium. If we want to provide for the financial well-being of everyone living in this city, in every neighborhood, we can do that too without a stadium. Those are the people that this committee needs to stand up for, and those are the people who deserve for this proposal to be rejected completely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have David DeCorte. David DeCorte or DeCorte? Can they hear me in the overflow room?
They should. I think it is slightly delayed.
Is there anybody in there?
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next, and he is.
Here he comes.
Oh,
Here he comes.
David, all right.
If you want to encourage all of it, yeah, anyone that's put in a card to just come into this room.
All right, if you can state your name and address and the mic for the record, please. Thank you.
My name is David DeCourt. I live at 2162 First Avenue North. And I wanted to ask the council tonight to recommend that the city council vote no on the Hines Race project. I think that it's fundamentally an absurd deal because we are effectively giving away that land for a fraction of its value. We are, the reason that we're giving that away then is so that these developers can then build something like 5,000 market rate, effectively like luxury houses, which will provide no real community benefit. All it will do is effectively accelerate gentrification that's already ongoing in St. Petersburg. We're in an affordability crisis, and we're talking about making that crisis worse. I think that if we're talking about keeping promises to the community that were made decades ago, I think that the fact that really kind of belies that is that we're giving the developer the ability to opt out of building the small number of affordable units that they've committed to, but asking them to just pay a one-time fee of $25,000. I think that's pretty much all I had to say, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Anthony Williams. Anthony Williams. All right, we're going to move on to the next. UB Rhymes.
Basil?
I didn't say basil. No, UB.
Rhymes.
Rhymes.
R-I-N-E-S.
Yes. RHYMES?
No.
No.
Your time will come. Your time will come.
Please do indicate
Okay. All right. So just for the record, thank you, Attorney D. UB Rhymes has put in a request and he has listed it. He is against. Next up.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. Next up, we have Alec Wilkowski.
Hi there, Alec Wilkowski. I'm at 3752 38th Avenue North. There's been a lot of great discussion here tonight. However, I'll be narrowly focusing in on apprenticeships. I want to thank this body and staff as well, especially Member Whitney, who made that motion regarding the 15% apprenticeship utilization. We sent y'all a letter on January 9th, and I just wanted to use this time to kind of like a little bit of update about where we're at. And so it's great to see that, you know, the 15% we addressed in our letter was adopted at the last meeting, and then also that to see the reporting element required. I'd maybe like to check in with procurement and find out how they do, like what they already do for reporting and what they do for enforcement, and how, you know, if this project were approved, how the Labor Council could be a partner in that and could assist with that. There was also language in our letter that we sent that said, you know, we want all trades to be represented in this 15%, not just lump, you know, a bunch of plumbers and pipe fitters on there and completely forget about, you know, painters and laborers and that sort of thing. And we'd like to maybe come up with some creative ways that we could, you know, ensure that there's a diversity of workers hired there. So Brian, I might, I know it's tight turnaround, but maybe we can get together in the next week or so to discuss that, especially and get procurement on that as well. And then as far as the reporting and penalties, I think I kind of covered that. Like that's something we're working on here. But we're happy to see the progress that's made to include apprenticeships on this project. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Roger Butterfield. Mr. Butterfield, if you could state your name and address.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Roger Butterfield, and my address is 652nd Avenue South, St. Petersburg, Florida. So before I comment on the substance, I want to raise that asking residents to devote 2.5 to 3 hours in a weeknight, or excuse me, a weekday night to talk for about 3 minutes is a real barrier to community input. So I just want to raise that. And I, you know, y'all are your own council. You can, you know, move how you want, but I recommend that you move public comment to the beginning of next week's meeting. I think that'll increase the accessibility. So I'm here today speaking against any version of this plan that does not combat the skyrocketing cost of housing for residents of St. Pete, specifically for the working class, the people that built the city, that make it run every day. On January 2nd, an informal preliminary poll was conducted on the St. Petersburg Reddit page. It asked, do you want your city council person to vote in favor of the current plan? The mayor's office has negotiated with Hines Rays to use taxpayer funds to subsidize redeveloping Tropicana Field. 23 voted for yes, I like the plan as it is. 14 voted for no, I don't like the plan and the city needs to negotiate for a better deal. 92 voted for no, I don't support using taxpayer funds for stadium redevelopment. And 16 voted for I don't care and don't know enough about the plan to support or oppose it. This means that 73% or 106 of 145 of the respondents don't support the current deal. Now, that is not a scientific survey, that is a straw poll, but I think more assessment needs to be done of the community because that, to me, is a heavy no. In the term sheet, there's also a litany of potential benefits that may be provided, subject to market conditions. I want to be clear that this means subject to the developer making money, making profit. That is their fiduciary responsibility and their legal obligation, and that is absolutely what their interest is here. But that is not a community benefit. The benefit of the community should not be simply another way for the developer to profit from the community. This deal is before the committee today because the developers are getting a handout from the city. The CBA is meant to make sure that there are strings attached to handouts like this. The promise to only provide something that brings in more profit to the developer is not by definition, a benefit to the community and certainly is not an appropriate benefit in the shadow of the immense handout they're getting in this deal. There's a conflict of interest here between the fiduciary responsibility that Heinz Rays has to its shareholders and to the obligation that the City Council and the CBAC and the Mayor's office have to the residents of St. Pete. I ask that you negotiate on our behalf in a very strong way. And, for me, that is standing up to the developers and saying, we will not accept any units above 80% AMI. This will have a much greater impact, not simply on people who will live there, but also on depressing the rent and housing costs of, the majority of the working class in this city. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Sil Molston. Sil Molston. If you can state your name and address in the microphone for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Sil Molston. I live at 266 Catherine Boulevard. I would like to start off by saying that the definition that we are using for affordable housing is unconscionable. We are using a figure of average medium income of the people that have been able to manage to stay here over these years, that the real estate class and the landlords have been at war with the working class here, making it more and more unaffordable to live here. And so you're taking and you're not even putting it's not even what's affordable to most working class people. I am disabled. I had to actually move to Palm Harbor because even with 4 people, I couldn't afford anywhere in St. Pete. I think that we have that with this deal of giving upwards of $1 billion to build a stadium for private interests, we are neglecting the people that actually voted for you. They actually have a responsibility to. That's $1 billion we could be spending on feeding our homeless, on making sure that they have housing, on improving our transportation systems. I use Mobility on Demand, which isn't open on Sundays, and I assume because of underfunding, has to close at 7, which makes it so much more difficult to find a job and become a productive member of the, well, not that my productivity should be measured by that, but that I can sustain myself. If it weren't for my family and the support network I have, I would probably be homeless right now. And this deal would do even less for anything to help me. I would like to end this with a reading from Isaiah. Woe to you who make unjust policies and draft oppressive legislation, who deprive the powerless of justice and rob poor people, my people, of their rights, who prey upon the widowed and rob orphans. What will you do on that day of reckoning when disaster comes from far away? To whom will you flee for aid, and where will you bury your wealth? You can't take your money with you. And that's all.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Warren Willingham. State your name and address in the mic for the record, please.
Hey there, Warren Willingham, 3245 Jackson Street North. Just wanted to add that I love the developer saying we're not double dipping and then step by step explaining how and where they're double dipping. Let's not fall for the sunk cost fallacy of, oh no, look at what we've done. We've been to all these meetings. We can't deny the deal now. The stakes are way too high. This doesn't need to go through. Let's make an effort to get this right and not just to get this done. Anyway, with how much we're subsidizing this deal, we are paying for the community benefits, not the Rays. Let's not fall for it. Let's avoid lining the pockets of the middlemen and do it ourselves if we deem it to be important to us. If we don't donate to the Rays, we can make the museum ourselves. We can make our own affordable housing, make our own parks, multiple times over, and we should. The city should own a great deal of the land and build public affordable housing, mixed use, and mixed income. The rest can be parceled out to the highest and best use, parcel out the rest and let it develop on its own into a thriving mixed use area. The current amount of affordable housing is abysmal. It should remain on site and be mixed income to encourage social cohesion and 10x, like tons. Come on. Please deny this. Imagine how much more we could benefit the community if we committed a fraction of this massive subsidy to the Rays toward building public owned housing instead of padding the Rays' pockets. It seems like the Rays came at us with the worst deal imaginable and expect us to have only a little bit of pushback, and then they will so kindly bring us a deal that is still incredibly favorable to them, and it still makes us feel like we got a good win and we can pat ourselves on the back. The city is successful on its own. Let's not fall for this. Please deny this. Your kids and grandchildren will thank you, and I thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Madison Rice. Madison Rice? Oh, okay, cool. State your name and address in the microphone for the record, please.
Hi, Madison Rice, 3245 Jackson Street North. As Warren just said, please don't fall for sunk cost fallacy just because we spent a year and all this time fleshing out this deal doesn't make it a good deal. If we take that appraisal at face value, we're giving them $174 million in free land. Currently, as the deal goes, they'll be paying for that land in installments, meaning that the money is worth even less than that. And I still haven't seen a net present value number for what we will actually be getting for the land from them. We are giving away this massive, appreciable asset, and they're going to give us $50 million in some community benefits subject to market conditions, which means subject to the Rays and Hines making money. This would be the largest subsidy in our history, and we're not even done paying for the Tropicana field site originally. I urge you to deny this deal, tell City Council that this agreement does not have sufficient community benefits to justify the massive subsidy, and don't waste your time trying to tweak and nudge this deal in the right direction. It is not salvageable. You just heard from Hines. They don't even know how to or want to finance additional and timely affordable housing, even with this unprecedented subsidy from the city. Imagine what we could do with all of that money and land if the city denied this deal. For reference, the entire Sunrunner project cost $44 million. We're about to give away hundreds of millions, much of which will be tied up in bonds with interest for 30 years. Let's redevelop the site for ourselves so we don't have to beg the Rays and corporations to give us what we need. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next up we have William Kilgore. Rilgore? I'm so sorry. I am. All right. If you can state your name and address in the microphone for the record.
Perfect. Yes. Hey, everybody. William Kilgore. I'm a resident of the Ponce de Leon neighborhood, and I am an organizer with the St. Petersburg Tenants Union. I just wanted to start because there was a rumor going around that there wasn't going to be public comment at next week's meeting. I'm not sure what. Yeah, there was a few folks saying that. I just wanted to clarify, let you all know that that was going around because we want to make sure everybody's got input. I'm not sure where or why, but thanks to the city for getting back to me this morning. But the let me just go into it real quick. So housing, not enough to begin with. You've got 4,800 unaffordable market rate units and only 600 at or below 80% AMI. We know that. And see, this is the thing because they reduced that number at 80% or below. It was originally 731 units in the original proposal were at or below 80% AMI. That dropped to 600. And of those 731 affordable units that are at 80% AMI or below, 603 were supposed to be around 60% AMI. Now that's cut down to 300. So no, they didn't increase anything. They cut it off. And this is the biggest problem is because we know Black households will naturally be locked out of these opportunities when more units are set at 120% AMI because we know how this racist system is rigged against Black families who we know make less income on average. And that's wrong. If this is going to get better wages or better jobs, that's great. But this is a big issue, and folks are going to be locked out of this. The St. Pete housing data you were shown, somebody came up here earlier. Yes, the city needs to be looking at rent burdened households specifically. That's really important because what they're putting in here, it's not proportional to the need. It's just not. We have the vast majority of rent burden, cost burden households who pay more than 30% of their income on rent or mortgages. They are the ones who are most affected by the rent burden. So Raise Hines, the only goal is to maximize profit. Reduction of affordable housing is a testament to that. Their inflexibility and unwillingness to listen to the community is a testament to that. And all I'll say is that in 20 years, the values of the Rays franchise has gone from $200 million to $1.2 billion. They didn't do that. We did that. Public resources did that. Here we are getting evicted from our homes. Here we are making starvation wages and without medical care, adequate medical care. Here we are struggling to feed our kids, all while these investors and top dogs at Rays Hines laugh all the way to the bank, and it's a bad deal. It doesn't help working people, and I think it's class warfare. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next up we have Mary Gherkin. Ms. Gherkin, if you could state your name and address in the microphone for the record.
I am Mary Gherkin, and I live at 1345 15th Street North, so I'm right down from the gas plant and the stadium. I've lived here 40 years, and this is such a huge project, and I know that there's been a lot of time spent, and I have tried, because I live so close and because my city is so dear to me, I've tried to be as involved as possible in this thing, and I've come to the last two meetings, and it's eye-opening. It does not sound like it is a good investment. I don't feel that's not what I originally wrote down, but that's how I'm feeling listening to this. I'm just feeling like this is not to our benefit, not to the community. So my two issues originally were about the affordable housing. That is so essential. I know that I could never live here. If I hadn't have bought my house when I did, I would not be able to afford to live here anymore. And one of the things about affordable housing in St. Pete is there are so many big high rises being built all over the city that it doesn't even look like what it used to look like, or like that I could not afford any of those places. There's so few housing options for people, working people. And we own this land, so we need to keep it. And the other thing that I'm not hearing anything about is sustainability. How are these things going to be built? I'm not clear on, is St. Pete just going to own the stadium, the museum, and this affordable housing? And I know that St. Pete has an integrated sustainability action plan, and that is that anything owned by St. Pete is supposed to follow those criteria. And some of those have to do with public safety, smart waste management, energy storage, LEED standards, net zero consumption. But if we sell this land, what are they going to have to abide by? Are they going to have, that gave me some comfort, feeling like at least things are going to be built well and sustainably, since we live so close to the coast. And since if you build it well, you can have better energy efficiencies. But if you don't, then, it's going to be water under the bridge. And I'm not hearing anything about that. I haven't heard a word about that. And I think it's very, very important.
Recommendations on city policy and city projects. There are certain elements of that absolutely can and should be applied to external projects, but really that is more of kind of guiding city policy on how we can reduce waste, net zero, et cetera, in the future. We will be having conversations, we have and we will continue to have conversations with Rays Hines as to how those can be applied to this project. Where is it relevant to apply? Which of these efforts in the ISAP does make sense for a private developer because it is that inward facing document. So we will continue to have those conversations, and that is required by the community benefit ordinance that some of those must be met.
Okay, so my curiosity was because I know in mixed-use developments in town now, we have some, for parking garages in particular, I'm gonna point to those, we have some specific guidelines requiring what you provide as far as electric vehicles. So that's why I was wondering if it's also, also the sustainability is also overlooked by the city in a way.
Yeah, and that's ultimately part of our land development regulations and city code that continues to get updated as new technologies become available and become more economical as well. So we certainly expect that will continue over the next 20 plus years as this project progresses, if this project is approved by city council. So we continue to have those conversations with Rays Hines. They have outlined their sustainability efforts. I think there are 9 different kind of objectives that they have provided in their impact report. And we will continue to work on really specific guidelines and specific requirements for this project.
Okay, and I apologize for making this a longer process, but I feel like in the past, we've had these questions come up, they're never answered, and I feel like when they come up, we should get an answer and some clarification, so.
I don't think there's an apology needed. I agree. So it's okay. Thank you. All right, and so next we have Sharon Joy Kleisch. Please state your name and address in the microphone for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Joy Kleitch. I live in District 7 and the Old Northeast neighborhood. And I want to thank the council for slowing this down, taking the time to change the process. Some of you know that a few years ago, the city proclaimed itself to be a city of compassion, city of peace, and a city of equity. Before that, I think we could also acknowledge, and we have research to show it, it was a city of structural, systemic, and strategic racism. So the Tropicana field didn't solve the problem, and the gas plant district isn't going to solve it. But maybe the process, like you've said tonight, a healing, a restoration, it's a process, it's not a switch. And so, again, thank you for slowing us down. If I'm reading the schedule correctly, we have opening day in 2018, play ball, right? So I want to determine, when is the city council supposed to make the decision after you give your recommendation? No timeline?
I'm happy to touch on that. So we are currently working with our attorneys, outside counsel, Rays attorneys, Hines attorneys, county attorneys on drafting the documents for city council. Okay. We are currently looking at most likely an April timeframe in order to be in front of city council with all those various agreements.
Very helpful. I heard tonight, maybe you remember hearing this, everybody has different figures on this. Remember early on hearing that? Everybody has different figures. So I had a wild idea. What about engaging some of our professors, our teachers in the Pinellas County schools to engage math or other teachers to take the numbers we've heard and translate it to maybe 10th graders who could explain it to the rest of us, what all these numbers may mean. Because the truth is, we have 8 districts, and it is 8 people that are going to sit there and make their recommendation based on what you and they've learned. So as I said, I'm in District 4. I had the privilege of participating in a conversation with District 7 to bring forth the people's voices about what they wanted in last year's budget. So what I'm wondering is, couldn't we slow down and have some conversations with any of the council members that wanted to in 8 districts so that the people could, again, come forth, hear what's translated about the numbers, ask some questions, watch these recordings that you've
That 15 minutes went fast. I mean, 15 seconds rather. Yeah.
Chair Matthews, can I comment on her?
Absolutely.
I think she brought up a point that I distributed by email earlier tonight. I don't know if all the council members have seen it yet, but it was a recommendation by the public resident to do a third-party industry group analysis, such as the International Economic Development Council. So that way we have a third party potentially being able to evaluate the terms and have someone provide us with some input. So we have one source of everything that you're talking about. So I just want to bring that up.
And Committee Member Mueller, if I may, that was precisely what we did with HRNA. So HRNA was hired by the city. It was not the Rays hiring this firm or Heinz hiring this firm. It was hired by the city to look at the economics of the deal, which are the numbers that were reflected in your packet. That information had been provided to the CBAC members, which was that independent third party. They were really our consultants to look at the deal for the city, to provide recommendations on all 4 of the proposals that came in to the mayor and to administration and ultimately to city council. And so, we feel, staff feels that has been accomplished through the HRNA study.
Brian, I don't know if it's possible. Would it be possible to have someone from HRNA here next week if we have questions that they could answer on a sort of a more technical level? I don't know if they're even based in St. Pete, but I don't know if that's possible.
We will certainly be happy to ask. They are based in New York, and our agreement has ended with them. But maybe we can convince them to at least virtually tune in at the next meeting and respond to any questions related to that analysis that
I
they
think the fact they've already done the analysis, they're a very highly regarded, well-known firm who worked, I think, on the city's behalf. So, but if they could be here, that'd be great. If not, I understand. But
We'll certainly look into it.
that'd be helpful.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
All righty. Ms. Deputy Jap, yes, ma'am.
Are we done with public comments?
Yes, we are. We have more. And there's more. Okay.
I do have something when we're done.
I think this is fantastic. I mean, okay.
I think we need to take a break.
Can we take a break?
Certainly.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's take a 10-minute break. Yeah, a 10-minute break.
Hello, St. Pete. Welcome to the District 7 newsletter.
We're back with more updates and opportunities for you to get involved. Let's dive into the latest news. Healthy Food Action Plan. The City of St. Petersburg is introducing a new program called the Healthy Food Action Plan, aimed at addressing the social, environmental, economic, and physical aspects of food access and security in St. Pete through programs, projects, partnerships, and policies. The Healthy Food Action Plan project is funded by federal funds to the city through the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and will be operated by Healthy St. Pete,